Okay, hello everyone. Welcome back to Battle of the Brackets. This has been a long time coming. I haven't kept track of how many months we haven't done this show, but it feels good
Eight
to bring it back.
or
8.
10,
Wow. Jesus
maybe
Christ.
10.
But we're back. We have a full house. We have some familiar faces. We have a new face today. I'll go through and introduce everyone right now before we get into today's bracket. I'm Chris, as usual. George, Tate, and Ryan is back to judge for us today. And introducing to the channel, Harry, who is joining us tonight as our fourth fighter. Battle of the Brackets, for anyone who doesn't know, and we'll go into the rules and the films in question. But today we are arguing best apocalyptic movie. This is not done in bad taste. We just want a bit of a laugh. In these trying times, we just thought we want to come on, chat movies, have fun. And we always say, this is our favorite show to do on the channel. It's all in good fun. Yes, we all argue films and sometimes it can get pretty heated, but we're all mates of it, hopefully, by the end of it. So, yeah, I don't know how do we do this now? Do we pass over to introduce the films? How are we doing this thing?
We'll go to the rules first. So, for those that are new to it, the way it works, we have a load of films against each other in a bracket, which we'll see very shortly. And the person whose film's up first on the left will have 1 minute to argue why theirs is the best. The next person will then have 1 minute. Then there'll be a 30-second rebuttal to the first person, then a 30-second rebuttal to the second person. The rules are there are no rules, to say in Greece. You can attack the other film, defend your film, don't talk about their film, maybe lose, but whatever happens, you've got a minute and a half to talk. You just don't interrupt the other person, and when someone says time, try and end it there. If you do go over, you can be penalised with them getting a couple of extra seconds, vice versa. So, if that makes any sense, and then in the final, you get 1.5 minutes for your main argument point plus 1 minute rebuttal. A bit longer because you've got it that far, which actually makes it a lot harder than you think it would. But in the meantime, we are going to introduce today's films. So if you look at the screen now, you should be able to see. Now we're doing it to stream out. It's a bit different to normal. You can see our faces while I screen share. So we have Chris and the first Matrix film versus Tate and Cloud Atlas. Myself and Avengers Endgame versus Harry and Zombieland. Then we've got Harry with Mad Max Fury Road versus Tate with Shaun of the Dead. Then we've got Chris and Terminator 1 versus myself and This Is the End. Myself and Wolf the Planet of the Apes versus Harry and can someone please say it?
Noshka of the Valley of the Wind.
Thank you. Sorry, we know how that one's going to go. Then we've got Tate and 28 Days Later versus Chris and Blade Runner. Tate and Children of Men versus myself and Interstellar. Harry and Wall-E. That sounds like a great sequel, actually, isn't it? Versus 10 Cloverfield Lane, which is Chris.
And I think we've kind of been very liberal with the term apocalyptic movie here. When we were doing the draft for this, we had a couple of, not disagreements, but sort of deciding how we were actually going to classify the word apocalyptic. I think we're basically extending it from apocalyptic to post-apocalyptic to dystopian future. Basically anything that is different to our current present or our upcoming future. So I think that's basically how we're going to do it. And obviously, anyone watching, I don't know if we have got any viewers at the moment. It says 2 at the top. I don't know if that's counting us. I don't know if that's extra people. Please feel free to comment throughout as we do the matches. And also, if we've missed any apocalyptic movies on the list, which we clearly have, there are many others that we haven't said that are your favorites. Please do let us know some of your favorites as we go along as well. Right. I think that's all formalities done. Are we going straight into it?
Round 1. So, Chris and the Matrix versus Tate. And
It's the Wachowski off. It's the Wachowski.
Back when they were brothers.
Right. So, Chris, you have 1 minute on the clock. On the clock. Starting. So the wrong clock. Starting now.
The Matrix isn't just a game changer in terms of apocalyptic movies, it's a game changer in sci-fi films in general. This paints a very, very interesting image of the future and the apocalypse itself, because there is an apocalypse in this movie. It's very much shrouded in the background, but it is very much a key component of this film. This is a very interesting film in that it shows, and we've all probably had thoughts like this. Why are we here? What is it to be human? Is this the real life? Is this just fantasy, to quote a Queen song? But when you get down to it, the real apocalypse is very damning to humanity and shows like man's reach, extending its reach beyond what it's capable of, with the arrival of AI, artificial intelligence, and the war that ensued between humans and machines, humans blotting out their own sun in order to one-up the machines eventually rising and using humans as fuel, like the amount of energy that a human produces. Damn it.
Hey.
Well, you hit the hammer on the nail straight away by saying that the apocalypse was a background part of your film, by the fact that they don't really explain much of it in the first Matrix film. They have a very brief explanation, you see a very brief shot of it, and then you don't actually get to see society live out the apocalypse itself. With Cloud Atlas, you get to see the beforehand, you get to see the during, what causes it, you get to see what happens after. You get to see the whole life process of an entire apocalypse, retold through the stories of these actors over and over again in different roles, but the same face. It is a phenomenal film. The Wachowskis absolutely reached their peak with it. I so wish that we had the 4-hour cut to see even more of this world and this universe that has come out, whereas in fact your sequels to your films extended on your apocalypse, told more, showed its society. Your film doesn't show much at all. It barely shows anything. Cloud Atlas shows 2 different storylines, which depicts both the coming of the apocalypse, the various things that led towards it, and a very key part, how they survive after.
Chris.
Okay, my film doesn't show society because there's barely any society left. There is a small pocket of humans left at Zion. That is it. Everyone else has been wiped out. And let's not beat around the bush here, Tate. You've got like 2 vignettes in your film. Cloud Atlas is a film with very short stories, all interconnected. Only 2 of those are post-apocalyptic, and none of those are particularly remarkable. The one that's set in the far future in like a city, we've seen in countless things such as Ghost in the Shell, even Matrix, Blade Runner, any number of those. And the other one is
harkening back to classic films doesn't make it a bad film in itself. It harkens back to Soylent Green with the use of humans being turned into food. That's dystopian. That's amazing. With The Matrix, I swear with Cloud Atlas, there is more scenes and more screen time shown to the actual apocalypse than your film, and it only takes up like, was it a third of the film? So if you're towing on arguments about how much the apocalypse is actually shown, Cloud Atlas shows way more and shows more of an impact of what it has on humanity. Your film doesn't even really show Zion; it shows a remnant.
Oh, round 1, guys. I've forgotten how hard it is.
It's like greasing the groove, isn't it? It's like, it's like getting back into it. It's never easy going first.
No. Has anyone? So for the new people, myself, Ryan, and Harry will then vote who goes through based upon the argument. Normally, this is the bit about everyone doesn't want to go first because we're all still taking it in. Has anyone made their mind up yet?
Anyone feeling brave?
Yeah, I'll go first. I can't believe I'm going to say this. I think Tate's made a better argument. Not that Tate can't argue, just that I didn't think Cloud Atlas had a chance. I know. I think they both made excellent points, but I think Tate's rebuttal was quite strong, and he talked about. Hang on, I noted it down here. He noted that The Matrix needed its sequels to expand on its initial ideas, but Cloud Atlas could sort of stand alone as its own thing, and he didn't need anything else to sort of strengthen its ideals. And I just thought that was a really good point, because when we're talking about the strength of a film versus another film, The Matrix, I mean, I know the sequels are not well rated, but I think the point that Tate made was that to truly and like appreciate the apocalypse of the film, you needed to have the context of those sequels. So I think in terms of arguing for a better apocalyptic film, for me, I think Tate just takes this one.
Harry, have you?
Yeah, no, I've got to say I agree. I adore the Matrix films. I think they're a fantastic trilogy. But I think just in terms of the arguments presented here, really Cloud Atlas just was presented far better. I think the idea of showing the before, the after, the during, all these little things sort of tying together, I think is something that really, in regards to doing an apocalyptic film, really makes it stand a little bit higher than that of The Matrix.
So, The Matrix is out. I'm not
cards already.
I'm not going to lie, Chris. I did think Tate had a stronger argument.
Yeah,
I would have.
that's fair. That's fair.
He brought his A game to that one, which I didn't see coming either. Cloud Atlas soldiers on to the quarterfinal.
This is where George has to quickly edit the bracket he pre-made where he's already got the Matrix.
It's only in the final.
You're clicking away right now.
Yeah. Control Z.
We've got Holly in the comments before we move to the next round. She says, appreciate your entertainment. Big thank you. Thanks for tuning in. We'll try and keep the funnies going for at least the next 2 hours.
Right, so we have Avengers Endgame versus Zombieland. My word. God, it's nervous, isn't it? I've not done it in so long.
I did it for the first time.
Right, tell me when.
Chris, have you got a timer, or do you want me to? Run this one?
I can do the timer. That's fine.
Yeah, go ahead.
Give me a second. Stopwatch. Okay, minute on the clock. Go.
This isn't just the biggest apocalyptic film of all time. This is the biggest film in the history of cinema now. Avengers Endgame is unparalleled. Now, yes, it's an apocalyptic film. However, what this does that differs it from all the other films, it's not trying to prevent the apocalypse. They decide to go back in time to stop it. Now, they've already lost. We don't need to talk about Infinity War. The film begins bleak. These are heroes that have absolutely failed. And this film goes years down the line, how society's moved on. It does the one thing apocalypse films can't. These people have moved on with their lives. There are focus groups. There is not eco stuff, but there's like whales in the rivers that wouldn't be. This film shows the detrimental effects of that, people in therapy sessions trying to communicate. It's these moments like this which build this film up to the soul where you realize how bad everything is, not just these individuals, but to everybody else. The fact it's got its own name, half of the world wiped out on the spot. And then there's a glimmer of hope that these people can then come back in the one chance they could do anything, sacrifice anything to prevent this awful apocalypse from happening.
Time. Minute on the clock. Harry, go.
Unlike Avengers Endgame, Zombieland is a very different sort of film. The apocalypse is just a backdrop. You say with Endgame you can't talk about Infinity War, but really you have to. Like, it doesn't stand alone as its own sort of separate identity. It's just this continuation of a previous product. And while that's great, it gives you all this insight into the actual apocalypse, it doesn't really give you anything by itself. In something like Zombieland, for example, you just dropped into the middle of this world. It's had its apocalypse. You have a few flashbacks to sort of show how everyone was. But overall, it's just there, and you're just in it much more immediately. In regards to the actual film itself as well, the acting is superb. Woody Harrelson as Tallahassee is fantastic. Frankly, I think it's his best performance. And just generally the entire cast really rounds out and makes it feel like this film about characters, not about the world itself, which I think for an apocalypse film, these quiet moments really drive home exactly what sort of film it is and exactly what makes it feel so intimate and unique.
And time, 30 seconds, George, go.
And to be fair to Zombieland, it's got a great cast. You like the 4 characters, but imagine if half of these were wiped out. They just disappeared to dust, and then the sequel was them dealing with that. Avengers deals with that. You speak about character moments. We've got Iron Man's great sacrifice, one of the most emotional scenes in the history of cinema now, a moment that everybody now knows and adores. I am Iron Man. It was the perfect poetry rhyming, as George Lucas would always say. I think that was far more effective as an apocalypse film than, unfortunately, Zombieland was. And the other thing, Avengers is
time, 30 seconds, Harry, go.
I think with what you're talking about there, yeah, it had some great emotional moments, but they're only so emotional because of the build-up towards them. As a unique film, it's an important moment. Don't get me wrong, it's an important film, but I don't think as an apocalypse film it's particularly impressive. The end of the film isn't about the apocalypse; it's about these people fighting, which is fantastic. But it's not really what we're talking about. In regards to Zombieland, however, the apocalypse is the entire film. That is the plot. It's just them trying to survive, getting through day by day, and it's this play-by-play for it. It's
hard.
I'm not going first this time.
That was like
Damn, Harry just like coming out with both barrels in like the opening round. Like, damn. I'm going to go first on this one. I'm going to give it to Harry. I liked his argument about saying that the whole film takes place in that environment. It throws you straight into it. I thought it was interesting that he went into the cast as well, sort of giving it a more sort of all-rounder of the movie. And I think the thing that did it for me and kind of cemented it for me was the argument that as a unique film, I think he said, as like a standalone movie, it doesn't really have as much impact because you have to have had those 20 whatever movies beforehand. And that kind of hit home for me in the rebuttal there. So I'm giving this one to Harry.
Tate, you good?
I need to talk through this one. I really do, because I understand George's point of this being Avengers being like the biggest film, not just of like this modern era, but like the highest grossing film of all time, has recognizable moments, has very unique moments which you wouldn't find in other films. And sure, we've had 20 films that have built up to that, but like these are characters that even with watching the film on a blank slate, I still feel you'd feel that emotion. But that's my personal opinion. That's not from the arguments itself. I do love Harry's argument though about the characters themselves being the main focus and then just surviving the apocalypse instead of that kind of whole going and fixing it. But that's up for debate. I'm going to leave this one for Ryan to decide. I'm going to give this one to George because that was a really equal argument, and I probably wouldn't be able to pick apart a winner between the two. So I'll leave it up to Ryan to do so instead.
How kind. I don't know. I can't really step on anything that Tate's probably not already stepped on about the quality of the arguments and the quality of the films themselves. I don't know. It's so difficult. They're both phenomenal. I think gun to my head, I think I'm going to give this one to Harry. I think he just edges it for me. Again, I think a similar point to the last round. It's about how strong the film is as an independent piece rather than a piece of sort of a bigger universe. So I think for me, I'm going to award this one to Harry.
Fair enough. That was a lot harder than I thought. And they're also actually really similar films. I realised that approximately 10 seconds into Harry's argument.
We mentioned this as well, how at least in like the first half of the bracket, there's a lot of comedies in there. There's a lot of sort of awkward matches in there that you wouldn't usually argue against. So it's quite a unique argument, really. But yeah. So
we already have a quarterfinal lined up: Cloud Atlas versus Zombieland. Beforehand, we still need to get round one done. We have Harry back with he's currently winning. Let's see if we can carry on. He has Mad Max Fury Road, and he is taking on Shaun of the Dead. Harry, you're going to be up first for this round. Chris, do you have a timer ready? I'm really looking forward to this.
I do. Yep. Right. So Mad Max Fury Road, 1 minute on the clock. Go.
When you think of an apocalypse film, you think of Mad Max, you think of The Road Warrior and The Wasteland. It is unbelievably iconic. And the fact that George Miller comes back, 20, 30 years later with it's hard to call it a sequel, but a continuation of his original story, and that it's so good, and it's not just like a phoned-in cash grab, is just amazing. The world building is ridiculously deep and dense and just so intricate. Every little thing has a reason for being there. The war boys, the gas town, the bullets, every part of it is so well fleshed out and well thought out. It's really hard to explain, and it does it all in the background. It's all told through action, through scenery, not through dialogue or exposition dumps. It's just this rich, intricate world that you're just thrown into. These harsh, uncaring people trying desperately to just sort of exist after an apocalypse. It's really unclear, but just something has happened, and it's about these people and their desperation, their struggle for survival. And I think, frankly,
time. 1 minute for Shaun of the Dead. Go.
Shaun of the Dead is how British people deal with an apocalypse. The first thing you do when you have an apocalypse is you think, oh, fuck it, I want to go to the pub. And that is kind of the British humour that they bring into the film. It's how British people would survive and deal with that kind of apocalypse. What would happen if you dumped a bumbling idiot into a zombie apocalypse and he had to survive it out? And his mates also try and survive out as well. And that has got such a massive ingrain into British pop culture nowadays. I mean, if we're talking about quotability of the films, you would quote maybe 6 or 7 different things from Shaun of the Dead. You would quote one thing from Mad Max Fury Road, and that was in the trailer, and that's the Lovely Day thing. If we're talking about the films themselves, if I think of movie apocalypse, the first movie apocalypse film I think of is The Road Warrior, not Mad Max Fury Road. If I'm thinking about the actual apocalypse itself, there is such a vibrant thing that comes about with Shaun of the Dead. The zombies themselves feel like a character that comes along with you for the journey. There are some points where you're rooting for them and some points where you're not.
30 seconds for Mad Max. Go.
You talk about how there's so many more quotable lines in Shaun of the Dead as opposed to Fury Road, and that's absolutely true because Fury Road has about, 30 lines of dialogue total, because it tells the entirety of its story through its action, through its fantastic set pieces. You talk about vibrancy in Shaun of the Dead, and don't get me wrong, the zombies are fantastic, but the vibrancy and just the little moments of character in Fury Road are unparalleled in any other sort of film of this quality. It paved the way for films like John Wick, where the story is told entirely through action. There's no need for dialogue or exposition.
Story's been told entirely through action for decades now. All the characters in Mad Max are one note. They're completely one note. If we're talking about actually following characters and hoping that they survive through it, you've got one in Mad Max. Not even Max is vibrant enough to make him want to survive. You've got Furiosa and that's it. With Shaun of the Dead, all the characters, all of them, like you get behind them. You feel like you want to let them survive. You feel like you want them to get to the pub and have a cold pint and then let it brew over. The comedy elements with it as well make it a fantastic rewatch. I'd rather rewatch Shaun of the Dead any day than I would on Mad Max Fury Road because it's dull.
What would you have a cold pint of in Mad Max? Would it be Mother's Milk? Like,
It'd be the water tower if you can get there before you do it.
I don't want to go first on this one this time. So
I do. Tate, I hate to say it, Harry wiped you there. You shot yourself in the foot when you brought up the unquotable lines from Mad Max, and then Harry's rebuttal, perfect story via action. I think that completely spooked it for me. So Harry got that.
I can go if you're not ready.
Yeah, you go for it, Ryan. You go for it.
I think I'm going to give this to Harry as well. I think, Tate, same as George, I think you shot yourself in the foot when you said all the characters in Mad Max were one note, but Max isn't one note. He actually has like a complete character arc where at the start he doesn't care about these people. He doesn't care about their plight, but by the end of the film he's moved by it. So I think you sort of shot yourself in the foot there. And then again, the quotability, the first quote that comes to my mind with Fury Road is actually the mediocre line, because I always quote that.
Yeah, I think I would have given it to Mad Max as well. Harry's actually really quite terrifying so far.
Really hard to argue against Mad Max.
Yeah, I don't envy you guys at all. I really don't.
Good luck everyone else on that one.
I'm a bit.
Has anyone ever got 4 films into the semi-final before?
I think 3 is the most, wasn't it, with George that time? But yeah, no, I think that he was really strong with his arguments. You know, like when Tate, gave a really good argument, Harry would dial it right back with an amazing rebuttal. How he said about the stories told through action. I thought that was a really interesting piece to go into, and he's absolutely right with that, in my opinion. I was almost going to give it to Tate in the first round, where he said that it's very sort of you can connect with it as a British viewer. You can sort of find the funnies in that, but I think Harry just took it with the rebuttal and his argument there. So giving it to Mad Max Fury Road.
Right, so that's a straight sweep. Mad Max drives through to the next round. So we have Chris, and that's a terrible pun. We have Chris and the Terminator versus myself. This is in. Chris, you are up first. Terminator 1.
Yes.
Terminator 1. Has anyone got a timer ready?
I can go if you need me to.
Yeah, I can get a timer up.
I've got one now if you want. Oh.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, 1 minute and go.
Okay, so the reason that I picked this over T2, which is obviously a lot of people's favorite Terminator film, is that I think T1 shows the more stark, brutal, and terrifying glimpse into the future. It was also the first movie to do it and show that kind of side of this cyber futuristic machine war, which before that point we hadn't really seen, at least not on this scale. And let's not forget as well, this was done on a very, very small budget. And what James Cameron was able to pull off with this first film was absolutely incredible and stands the test of time. Terminator, well, probably not as of right now, but was a franchise that was continuing to go on with the recent Dark Fate, and no Terminator movie with however much budget you throw behind it has ever come close to the terrifying quality of this future war. It sounds like quite an outlandish concept with, machines fighting humans, but when you see those hovels and those tunnels and those scared, hungry, tired people fighting this fight of this unparalleled enemy, it really does speak volumes, and you can see a lot of things that you could bring into if we went to war now.
All right, and 1 minute and go.
The problem with Terminator is that no one cares anymore. It is absolutely dead. The funeral was over 15 years ago now. It doesn't matter, 1, 2, whatever you pick. Everyone's just lost all sense. Every time there's an apocalypse, someone else travels back in time to stop it. It just happens. It's a loop, and we're all sick and fed up of it. This is the end, on the other hand. Every celebrity is in there. It doesn't matter who. James Franco has a house party. They are all evil bastards. And you get to see half of these die. Random cameos of people everywhere. You get to see them die. It's very satisfying. It has actors playing themselves in the most ridiculously entertaining parody you could ever imagine. And this shows all signs of the apocalypse. It even has a mockery of The Exorcist and a sequel to... oh my God, I've forgotten the name of the film. Pineapple Express built into it. This is a film you can watch whenever you want. You can have so much fun because you get the start of the apocalypse, during the apocalypse, and then going to heaven after. It completes all skills of an apocalypse. No saving the world. The world is done. You need to save yourselves, prove yourself to God, and then you can go up.
30 seconds, go.
I'm not arguing for the Terminator sequels. I'm arguing for the first Terminator movie, and this movie was actually saying something. It had a message behind it and created a very original concept. This is the end. Look at the cast: James Franco, Danny McBride, Seth Rogen, Michael Cera. Like, you could literally, it's the most arbitrary. I could make that cast in my sleep. I wasn't even looking at the cast. You know what I mean? It's just, and it doesn't stand the test of time. The celebrities, once, a few years' time, it's not going to stand the test of time at all. And if anything, it's just a slightly chuckle-worthy movie. It's nothing beyond that. Terminator is so much more.
George?
I think with the Apocalypse, Terminator 1, it just doesn't really, you don't really get a vibe of the apocalypse coming. It's more of, we just need to save this individual to save mankind for the future. That doesn't feel like the stakes are there. It doesn't feel like this is the world. This is the end, is showing the devastation. And this does stand the test of time, because these guys are funny then, they're funny now. It's even ironic. Some of them haven't come out too well, given obviously allegations, etc., etc. However, it's fresh in your mind, whereas Terminator, everyone's just forgotten about. Yes, it's got Arnie, but no one likes Michael Biehn. He's awful.
And time.
And the recast.
Oh, whoa, hang on. Michael Biehn, you're throwing shade at Michael Biehn there. What's all that about? I demand an extra 30-second rebuttal for that slur at the end.
Mate, I'll go first on this one.
Yeah, go ahead.
George had a lot of attack on Terminator in his opening argument, which was immediately shut down by Chris. And even though George tried to recover it, didn't recover it in my eyes. His arguments about the Terminator, you just spent too long arguing about the sequels, dude. And even when you focus back on the first film, the argument didn't actually make sense. They do show the apocalypse in the first film. So I'm giving it to Chris.
Yeah, I've got to say I agree. I think you went too hard against the sequels. Even these films are standalone properties. I think the Terminator 1 is a great film. I think it's a very important film. And even if you don't necessarily get the sense of dread of the apocalypse coming, you do get the sense of dread of these individuals. And I think that really sort of thematically, at least, is very similar. So I'm going to give that to Chris as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's already gone to Chris, but I think I would have gone that way too. I think George just leant a little bit too heavily on actually smashing the sequels of Terminator. But I don't think they need any help doing that, because I think they did that for themselves. But yeah, I think I'd just give it to Chris on that one. I think he just had a more cohesive argument for his own film. George, I think you sort of just maybe didn't necessarily have enough to say about this is the end. I think it would be my only criticism.
That's fair. It's hard with comedies.
Yeah, definitely is. The bracket's not been sort of kind to you either. It's going against one of the biggest sort of apocalypse films, is so renowned. Everyone knows, Arnie is Terminator, so.
Yeah, it's iconic.
That's right. So this is the end is out. Terminator 3. Next up, we have War for the Planet of the Apes versus.
You can do it.
I'll wait.
Type it into the little Google speech thing, text to speech.
Naishka of the Valley of the Wind.
I hadn't heard of this film until last night, which kind of says it all, doesn't it?
Call it Valley of the Wind, and
I'll just call it Valley of the Wind. I just can't. It sounds like Narnia. But
I was so confused when Caspian jumped into that movie. It just really threw me.
On a glider as well. Like, what the fuck?
Yeah, where did you get that from?
So it's War for the Planet of the Apes up first, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, right. Minute on the clock. Go.
I think with Planet of the Apes, it's a very famous franchise. I picked a prequel because this is the best one. This is the best apocalyptic movie. You have everything come to light. This is the moment where really the apes take over. That's the name of the film. It's a spoiler before the film begins, and it's about the journey of getting to that moment. Seeing humanity wiped out the virus, and seeing in this film how the virus has evolved into the fact that they're unable to speak. These are soldiers killing each other, humans killing themselves because they would rather die than fall to it, leaving apes in control of planet Earth for the future. And I think it's just devastating for the human race to sort of witness this. And at the same time as all this devastation, you find yourself in allegiance with the apes. They're not normal people, they're apes, but they're intelligent, they can speak, they've got their own sort of system in place, and you completely agree with them and you want them to take over. Yes, we know it's going to happen, but I just think this desolate landscape of seeing just the emptiness of Earth, these few people roaming it, humans fighting for what they've got left. I think.
And 1 minute for Naishka, Valley of the Wind. Go.
Okay, so War of the Planet of the Apes is a pretty good film. I didn't even remember which Planet of the Apes film it was until before this one. I had to look it up because those films just blend together. They are just so dull. There's no character to them, with the exception of Caesar, who played phenomenally by Andy Serkis. There is nothing there that George Lucas's films. It's just monkey good, human bad. It has the potential to act on these really interesting themes, these themes of like environmentalism and conservation, and the idea of what actually is an apocalypse, but it doesn't do that. Whereas Nausicaa, for example, really has these fantastic themes about environmentalism, about survival, about community, and I just think that's completely lost in something like Planet of the Apes. Miyazaki generally has fantastic themes in all of his work, but I think it shines brightest in this early Studio Ghibli work with Nausicaa Valley of the Wind, because the art style, every part of it is designed to convey this feeling of safety and community and home.
30 seconds, Wolf, Planet of the Apes. Go.
They're definitely not dull. This is one of the finest trilogies in history, but I'm talking about the third one, the best one, the war, the final one. In this, you mentioned Caesar. Yes, we align ourselves with Caesar. He's the protagonist. However, seeing his family murdered in front of him by the few humans left, the humans he didn't want to kill, just decided to start killing them, murdering his family. It's a mission of vengeance, and it's a personal, and that gives the stakes towards the final ending, to leave himself giving the apes their land, him dying at the final moment of his life, knowing that his life's work's come good.
And
that's
time,
a more powerful ending.
30 seconds, Nausicaa, go.
Yeah, but you say that, but it is this intimately personal thing. I get that, but it just completely misses the whole scope of the argument. Something like Nausicaa has more to say than just a story of revenge. A story of revenge is so pedestrian, it's so mundane, it's been told a million times by a million different people, and in this setting it's just a mildly interesting backdrop. It's not an interesting story, it's not engaging, it's just kind of there. It's not about the apocalypse, it's about these people, and I think that completely misses the whole point of what the film originally was trying to say.
Scorched fucking earth. I don't know with this one.
Okay, I'll go first then.
Okay.
Very, very interesting arguments on both sides. Very difficult for George and I guess everyone else here to get any scope off Nurusha Valley of the Wind, because no one on this earth has actually seen it.
It's on Netflix now. Go and watch it.
I know
no
it is. It's been on my list of films to watch for a while now. But as far as the arguments were concerned, George argued very heavily in favor of his own film. Like I know how passionate he is about the Planet of the Apes films. That's shone through on his argument. But going back to just what you were saying about you forgot which film it was, you can only really remember one character that is Caesar. He's kind of right. I only remember Caesar as really the only character past the first film that I actually cared about or like could remember by name or anything like that. So this argument's really hard, but overall, I feel like George's kind of defense of his own film purely for his passion was strong enough. But I will say it was very close, very, very close. So, George.
Ryan, do you want to go next, or?
Yeah, I can do.
Okay.
I think straight out of the gate, I'm just going to say I think I'm going to give this one to George too. I think he argued his film a little bit better. I still don't really know.
He was sweating then.
I still don't really. My only criticism, Harry's argument was fantastic, but I haven't seen either of these films, so for me it was great for me because I was able to come in blind and not have any sort of preconceived notions of what I feel the film is about or how well that's argued. So for me, I thought what was really strong was that George argued really well for his film, but I think Harry, I still don't really know what the film is about, if you know what I mean. I don't know what sort of apocalypse there is in Nausicaa, so I think that's where your argument sort of let you down there. Other than that, though, it was really close. I just think for me, the identity of the film, I believe is going to be clearly really strong, as it is with all the other Ghibli stuff, like you said. But I just didn't feel like you sort of let the film sort of speak for itself through you, if that makes any sense.
No,
you didn't sort of give me an idea of what the apocalypse in this film was about. So in this case of apocalyptic movie, I think George argued that a lot better. So
I would have given it to George as well. There was one moment where I thought Harry had taken it, where he said that a story of revenge is so pedestrian and it's been told a million times. But I agree with Ryan that I think George talked about his movie a lot and did have that attack, but I didn't really. I'm exactly with Ryan on this. He was spot on. I wanted more about Nausicaa as a movie and the plot of it a little bit more. I think a lot of it was attacking Planet of the Apes, which is all well and good to do, but I would have liked to see a little bit more of an argument for your movie. Also, completely pointless, but I like Maurice and Buck and Rocket and all the other
They
apes.
have names.
They did.
Ape 1, Ape 2, Ape 3, Big Ape.
Were they? Hold on. Were they all played by Andy Serkis?
Possibly.
Unfortunately, not.
Uh,
I'm not going to lie.
Even, Woody Harrelson was probably played by Andy Serkis at one point as well.
And now they're doing Venom together. Sad time.
Oh yeah, that's a point. Yeah.
Can I just say I've never seen Nausicaa, which is why I was terrified. I had it on my
Can we get this on record? How the fuck do you pronounce it?
I say
I've always
Nausicaa
found
because
Nausicaa, but that could be completely wrong.
I've always just read it
Nautical
as Nausicaa,
Adventures.
but I've never. I
Valley of
wouldn't
the
know.
Wind.
I say Nausicaa because the first time I watched it in Japanese, and they say that name about 1,000 times in the movie, and they say it like that. So I've just called it that. But if it's
That's probably-
Nausicaa in another,
Yeah, that's probably right then. Yeah, I'll go with that. Yeah.
So you say Nautica.
It went on my Netflix watch list. I just didn't get a chance to watch it today, so I was kind of dreading this because I couldn't attack it. Everyone
It's
knows
always-
my
you know
attack
what?
is the strongest.
It's always the hardest argument when you haven't actually seen the film you're fighting against. Always.
But you've only got yourself to like go on, then, don't you?
Yeah.
giant centipedes and a hang glider. That pretty much.
I mean, I saw
Yeah, it's
like
about 90%.
I saw like a 2-minute segment of it when I was really young, and it terrified me. Those giant, like, what are they, centipedes, bugs? I was just like,
Yeah.
whoa, no, thank you, and I changed the channel. Like, I'm out of here.
Right. What do we have up
We
next?
have Tate and 28 Days Later versus Chris and Blade Runner.
Okay.
Tate,
Accepted.
Tate, you have 1 minute on the clock. You are up first. Go.
So this might be the most terrifying apocalypse on this list because it feels so close to home. You have modern day London. You have Cillian Murphy waking up in a hospital, going outside and just seeing the place deserted. And that feels very kind of eerie and home-like. Not because of the current situation we're in at the moment, but even when watching it when I was younger, I always felt a connection to, oh shit, this is spooky, having the entirety of London deserted. And then you have the rage zombies coming in. Zombies are scary when slow. Zombies are scarier when they're running at you full pelt, bleeding from their mouths, frothing, and trying to eat your face. And as far as this apocalypse is concerned, it just completely throws these characters into the situation of survival. They immediately go to survival instincts. They're straight into that. And you can see the horror on their faces. You can see the pain that they go through when they lose loved ones. Whereas with Blade Runner, the apocalypse is on the title scroll and nothing else. That looks like a paradise. Chris,
Time.
you would love to live there.
Time. Chris.
Okay, so 28 days later, I'm going to go on the attack first with this thing. So, yes, you've got rage zombies in there, whatever, fast-moving zombies, but inherently, the film of 28 Days Later doesn't really do anything fundamentally different with the zombie genre. It's the same band of survivors. It's the same, they're getting picked off, deserted, ransacked world. That's been done ages ago in the old Romero films, and even since that movie, the formula hasn't really been shaken up, and 28 Days Later didn't do anything about that. Blade Runner is one of the most unique and memorable and important films in film history. And in terms of its apocalypse, yes, you do get the text screen, which sort of sets you into the world. But when we're introduced to that world, we get a sense of where it's gone. Set in the far off distant future of 2019, we see this very sort of urbanized, decayed, overpopulated world. And I think that's more prevalent because that's more of a believable way that our society would go. That's probably how a futuristic world would look. It would be grimy, it would be rainy, it would be oppressive and everything like that.
But you never actually see people experience that apocalypse, Chris. You never see any of the characters under any hardship in the film. You never even see background extras having a bad time. Sure, it's moody, it's blurry, whatever. Like in 28 Days Later, these people are surviving. They're not huddled up into one group and then, they're staying in this place, and they're fighting for survival. No, they're always on the move. They have to keep moving. They run into the military personnel, and that becomes a different struggle. There is always struggle within this apocalypse, whether it's the humans being the monsters or the zombies. With your film...
Chris.
I'll go straight into it. Okay. There is an argument to be had with my movie, though, that you said that people are not on the run in my movie. The replicants are on the run throughout this entire movie. This is like their apocalypse, essentially. They were born into this world by humans, machines, and now they're being hunted by the very things that created them. This is a horrible world for them to live in, but it's a believable society and a logical future of where our society and human beings will possibly end up with the technology developing and everything like that, and artificial
Time.
intelligence.
Oh, very well
Can,
played.
can I put in a note there?
No.
Ah,
Can you tell us the note after we voted?
I will put in the note after we voted.
Right. Has anyone decided yet?
No, I'm still not
Aaron?
in favour.
Right. I'm going to give this one to Chris because the damage was done in his first minute. The attack. It's a Survivor film. Chris explained the Survivor process. Tate, in your rebuttal, you literally proved Chris's point, and I felt to me that won the argument. You also mentioned about the apocalypse. You're not seeing the apocalypse take place. This isn't the argument. This is me. I'd have just said, well, it's 28 days after. So, but I just thought Chris had a stronger argument for that one. A very surprising argument, and also the replicants won me over too. That was the kind of nail in the coffin there, because I did not think he'd be able to argue Blade Runner, but he's done a fine, good job of it. So, I'd give mine to Chris.
I think I'd also give it to Chris, but it is very close. I think Chris's argument lacks a bit of cohesion at times, but I think his whole argument about it's a much more realistic apocalypse, like the capitalism being the villain rather than zombies, is really interesting. It's not something I've never really thought about when I looked at Blade Runner, and I think that's a really interesting way of putting it. And I think your whole idea as well about the replicants, I think that's again another really interesting idea which I'd never really talked about before. So for me, at least, it's going to be a new way of looking at a film I really enjoy. So for that alone,
May I put in my interjection now then?
Yeah.
Because I never said that people were not on the run in Blade Runner.
I thought you did.
I didn't.
You said that people weren't being pursued.
No, I didn't. Not at one stage.
I might have to run that back, but
I knew it'd come up in the voting. That's why I wanted to say it.
I just thought the Survivor argument on Chris's attack had kind of done it.
I never said the replicants weren't on the run.
we'll run.
I'm not voting on that. I'm voting on before.
StreamYard is a great program, but we don't have instant replay just yet. So.
One day, we'll get there. We've had this before. Ryan, have you decided to bed?
Yeah, I mean, not that it matters. I think Chris's rebuttal point about how it's the apocalypse for the replicants probably would have swayed me towards him at the end there. I thought that, again, I think it was a really original sort of point and a way of looking at it. But otherwise, I don't know. Yeah, it was a very close argument. They both argued it extremely well. I think Chris's rebuttal for me was just a bit stronger than Tate's rebuttal. Yeah, there's nothing else really to add there that has not already been covered for me.
That's really difficult because I will go on record saying that 28 Days Later is probably one of the best and standout gems in the zombie catalogue of movies. For the case of this bracket, I fucking hate. I can't
believe you brought up the Romero movies, dude.
I know, but you got to do what you got to do. All's fair in love and war, right? So
yeah.
Right. So next up, Tate, you've got Children of Men versus Interstellar.
This is going to be a good one, right? I'm going to get the timer on this one. Okay, so Interstellar's up first. George, that's yours, isn't it? Do I even need to ask that question? It's the one
it's Children of Men first.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Okay, okay, right. Tate, Children of Men, 1 minute, go.
Could we have had a possible better apocalyptic prediction than Children of Men in the way that humanity actually handles a genuine apocalypse? Police on the streets, people almost forced into rioting and stuff like that in some parts of the world. This film is an absolute masterpiece of not only cinema, but apocalyptic cinema. It takes a very small situation that we take in normal life as to be normal, people giving birth, and then it removes that element. It says, what happens if people just stopped one day? We don't hear why that problem comes about. We just hear that it stopped. And this is the people living with the consequences. We now have an entire generation which has basically not existed. We have giant gaps in time, which has caused chaos on the streets. We have the bombing in the opening scene. We have the people attacking in the forests, and then that one hope of resemblance, that one thing that will save humanity, comes out of the blue, and the entire plot shifts completely. This is a perfect film in my eyes. The direction is just groundbreaking. The car sequence is just mind-blowing.
Time. 1 minute for... Oh God, I've gone blank. Interstellar, go.
Sorry, but Children of Men is just an adult version of Doctor Who, a man running in his coat around the buildings. It's one of the most overrated films. I was really intrigued to watch this because everyone hyped it and I just didn't see it. The most interesting thing they talk about is the flu pandemic of 2008, and that's the only word said on the flu pandemic of 2008. Magically, there's the apocalypse. It doesn't feel like an apocalypse film. It just feels like a sort of Nazi Germany had they won the war. Police on the streets, yeah, this isn't police. This is our military killing everyone, everything. That beautiful miracle, the baby's born, everyone looks at it in a beautiful tracking shot, and then they're going back fighting within 30 seconds later. The baby's forgotten about. He gets chucked on a boat at the end. Interstellar, on the other hand, is about saving mankind. They accepted Earth is done. Earth will be destroyed. It's about taking what they love, the humanity, and finding somewhere else to live. It's the exploration into saving mankind, accepting loss of a planet. And some things just can't do that. You don't get sci-fi films that can embrace the loss. Think, right, we're just going to move our civilization elsewhere, and the journey that brings you on, the family attachment.
30 seconds,
Your
Children of
film
Men.
isn't even Nolan's best film. I don't even know where the argument is here. Your film isn't even in the top 3 Nolan best films. So you can't even argue that it's the best apocalypse film if that's the case. When Children of Men isn't just a Doctor Who thing, oh, person's running around, stuff like that. No, it's way more complex than that. He's not just running around all the time. He's trying to save this person. He's trying to get them to safety. He's trying to get them to sanctuary. And yes, the war starts over afterwards. That's a commentary on the fact that even if there is a miracle to save mankind, mankind doesn't want it always. That is the apocalypse in itself.
Time. 30 seconds. Go.
At one point, I never ever said this is Christopher Nolan's best film either. We definitely know that's not the case. However, Alfonso Cuarón has won 2 Oscars for directing. None of them were for this film either. So that completely disregards the best director's filmography. What more can I say about Interstellar? You've got practical effects. You've got this beautiful set. It's phenomenal. It's this journey. You've got the score of Hans Zimmer, which is one of the most important things. An entire soundtrack was done around a father-daughter connection. That's far more personal than a randomer giving birth. I want to know more about the character Clive Owen.
Time. Oh, Jesus Christ.
That was spicy.
Yeah. Okay, I'll go first on this one, considering like the last few times I always decide to go last, so it looks like I'm trying to sway the votes or something. This was a tough fight. This was a really tough fight.
That was very hard.
Yeah. I didn't quite get the whole Doctor Who argument thing from George's. I will say that right off the bat.
It's fine.
But Tate did lose a lot of power for me in the rebuttal where he mentioned, and I knew George was going to go here with it, where he said that it's not Nolan's best movie when he wasn't arguing that in the first place, because you couldn't really argue Batman for an apocalyptic movie, right? So I felt like Tate's rebuttal there was weak, and I think it sort of crumbled after that. But I thought his opening argument was very, very strong for it. And I like how he said that this is a natural way that, kind of what I said with Blade Runner, it's a natural way where we could assume that humanity would go to. But I think that George gave a more well-rounded argument for his movie, talking about the score as well, and the fact that humanity has accepted the apocalypse, which is quite damning in itself if humanity has accepted this cataclysmic thing and are moving on to something else. I think that George, just by a hair, talked more about his movie and gave more of a well-rounded argument for me than Children of Men. But I thought Tate's opening argument was quite strong. I had to sort of talk through that process again. It happens.
Talking out loud helps. That's how I do it.
Yeah.
I've got to say, for me, I agree. I think Tate really sort of lost it in the rebuttal when he went off on a tangent about Interstellar just not being the best Nolan film, which obviously it isn't. But I do think his opening argument was really strong. So I think I'm going to give it to Tate just on the strength of that initial sort of that monologue. I thought, and as well, his additional point at the end is how the point of the commentary about humanity not wanting to be saved. I thought, again, a great point. I think that's one of the messages that Children of Men really tries to drive home. I think that's very important as well.
Oh God. Yeah, I mean, I think Tate's opening argument was stronger, but then I think his rebuttal was considerably weaker. God, I don't know. I think I'm going to give it to George, because I think overall he had a much more cohesive sort of argument and point. I think Tate, if he didn't sort of just really attack Nolan's filmography, it was a bit. I don't know. I was a bit upset that you were doing it, because for my money, Children of Men is one of my all-time favorite movies. I absolutely love it. So personally, I was a bit like, oh no, what? Don't do that. What are you doing?
I just wanted to point out that he couldn't argue for the best apocalyptic film if it wasn't even the best film by that director.
You can.
Yeah, you
Yeah,
can.
of course you can, yeah.
Can I
but-
just
yeah, but you could say-
George, do you honestly,
I'm-
do you honestly think that Roma is better than Children of Men?
I didn't watch Roma, but he won an Oscar for it. I'll tell you what Alfonso Cuarón's best film is Harry Potter and the Prison of Azkaban. And can I also say I saw Children of Men for the first time today at 2:00 in the afternoon.
Oh, did you?
It's very
But-
fresh.
The boy did his
Did you
research,
enjoy
like-
it? Did you enjoy it?
Bits of it. I don't like Clive Owen in it. The Doctor Who comment, it didn't make sense. But when I was watching it, it was just him in a trench coat running around
I was
saving
about to say,
people.
I think I was going to say, like, to
That was-
defend George, I think he just meant the motif of a man running around sort of London or whatever in a big long trench
Right.
coat. I didn't think he meant that it was anything to do with Doctor Who other than it just a similar look. Yeah.
I was like, I did only watch the film once, but I don't recall any Daleks being in there. That's-
Well, hey,
It's the post-credit scene, Chris.
oh, right. Okay.
on my list of possibles to go on, I did have Dalek Invasion of Earth. So
Could you imagine, like, she got on the boat and then you just had in the background like an exterminate sound effect?
That's it. That's the end of the film.
Oh, that was hard. Like I said, Children of Men. That was I had two choices to watch Naruto or to watch Children of Men.
Could have been Naruto by the end of the film.
And, I had to take out Children of Men just because, by reputation, I think that was the one that I need. The history with me on this is that I am very good at attacking, and I'm sorry, Tate, but the moment you make a dig at Nolan, you've kind of like entered the trap. Like your foot is in the bear trap.
I kind of wanted you to push off that. I was trying to see if it would trigger anything in you.
So that
No,
was
'cause
pent up Tate though, like the Nolan hate. That was that sounded like it was brewing for a while, and you just had to get that out there. Like,
I mean, there are people I know
love
that
it.
it's their favorite Nolan film. There's some people I know it's their favorite Nolan film. It's not mine.
Oh no. Prestige is by far the best Nolan film.
We'll do this on another argument. Any of them on any given day.
so when Nolan's bought out enough movies to fill one of these brackets, then we'll argue best Nolan movie.
Chris, you can write us.
Oh God, could you imagine?
Right. So next up, we have Harry and Wally. Again, that's a film in the making. Get on it, Pixar. Again, 10 Cloverfield Lane. Harry, you're at first. You have 1 minute. Are you ready?
Yep.
Right. 3, 2, 1, go.
Pixar does emotion. If we're going to argue about anything today, that's something we're not going to argue about. They absolutely nail it every time, 100%. And that is shown nowhere better than Wall-E, where he is a robot. By definition, they have no emotions. But you have, within the first 20 minutes, with no dialogue, you have such an emotional attachment to this character. He explores this desolate, destroyed world. You see very clearly exactly why humanity destroyed it. You know exactly what the apocalypse is. It's us. Spoilers. But it doesn't matter because it's about this. It's this love story. It's this intimate connection between these two inanimate objects, and the way that they feel, the animation, the music, all of it comes together and creates this fantastic harmony, which just really shows like it's an anti-apocalypse film. If anything, it shows that it's never too late to find something new in the aftermath. It's never too late to go back and change things. It's a huge story. It's hopeful. It's fantastic. It's whimsical. It's funny. It's just astonishingly excellent.
Chris, on you.
Despite like the completely outlandish concept of Wall-E going toe-to-toe with 10 Cloverfield Lane, I actually think these two movies do have a little bit in common in that I think that both of the endings of these films fall flat compared to the opening setup, so I will go straight in with that. 10 Cloverfield Lane is an absolute terrifying roller coaster of a movie of emotions. This gives a very, and especially, I don't want to go too much into it, but with what's going on in the world at the moment, this whole self-isolation thing, sort of like, bunking up and sort of like staying indoors and everything like that. That is absolutely what this movie is. John Goodman is terrifying this movie. Mary Elizabeth Winstead wakes up in this bunker and she's just under the idea that something has happened outside. Some traumatic event has attacked humanity and they all have to stay indoors. And there's drips and drabs of information, and it gets to the point where you don't know if to believe John Goodman, if he's just a crazy, or if something genuinely has happened. And it plays on your own psychology as well. It's like, oh, damn it.
Aaron?
Yeah, I think the biggest strength of 10 Cloverfield Lane by a huge mile is its atmosphere. And I think Wall-E has that in spades. Again, the first 30 minutes of the film are completely without dialogue. It's all atmosphere. It's all told through this very slow, light-hearted pace. You get a sense for who this character is, what he's about, why he's there. And I think he just makes him such an endearing and lovable character that just really carries the film in its entirety. I think it's really hard to put it into words just how much you grow to like and love this character.
But I think Wall-E comes undone right after that moment when the dialogue starts kicking in and you have the fat humans in chairs and it's about a plant and an evil robot and everything like that. It completely undoes what the first act of that movie set up for me. Whereas 10 Cloverfield Lane has more impact because with a Disney film, you know they're going to save the day at the end. You know it's going to have a happy ending. With 10 Cloverfield Lane, it plays on your own doubt and you put yourself into that situation. Would you believe something in that situation? Would you want to break out and try and get outside, or would you want to stay within? And I think that's more important for an apocalypse because that is a natural survival state.
Good fight.
Yeah, very good.
Is anybody come to a decision?
I can go first if no one else is ready. I think Chris has taken this one for me for the strength of that rebuttal alone. I think both arguments were really good, really cohesive. But I think Chris's rebuttal was just a lot stronger when he talks about Wall-E, all the work it does in that first sort of opening half an hour, 40 minutes to instantly sort of come undone when the dialogue comes in and the sort of goofy humans in chairs. Because for me, when I watched that film, that's exactly how I felt. I was like, oh my God, I was blown away by the first 40 minutes. And then as soon as the dialogue came in, for me, it just became a sort of another run-of-the-mill sort of, oh, it's Disney. And like Chris said, you know it's going to have a happy ending because it's, a Disney movie, whereas 10 Cloverfield Lane really plays on your own anxieties as the viewer. So I think for me, it was just a much stronger piece. Not a filmmaking, but I think in terms of the effect that it can have on an audience member.
Okay, I'll go second. I'm actually giving this one to Harry. His opening argument, saying that it was almost like an anti-apocalypse film, and it's not too late for humanity and stuff like that. I really like that take on it. I've never really seen it as that kind of film before, in that sense, and I love that he was talking about how the atmosphere just builds over that first 30 minutes and how like a lot of the film doesn't have much dialogue. And sure, Chris came back in with a rebuttal talking about the dialogue itself, but by that point, the film itself, you have already fallen in love with the characters. You already love Wall-E for who he is, and you already start to love Eva as that kind of almost love interest for Wall-E. So I'm giving this one to Harry.
I'm going to give this one to Chris. Harry, I thought you had this, and then Chris's rebuttal came in. It was once you get past the 30 minutes, does start to undo the beginning of the film. I kind of had that vibe when I watched it, and then I think Chris went on to give me sort of reminders as to why I did forget about the second half of Wall-E. I think Chris's attack had him. There just wasn't as much shade thrown at 10 Cloverfield Lane, so I think Chris got this just for me.
Okay, so that takes us through the end of round one. So, do we want to stall for time, or do we have a graphic to throw up?
We do have a graphic, if you can give me approximately 5 seconds. But in the meantime, Harry, it's your first ever go, and you've got 2 in the next round, and you're doing very well.
I'll say Harry's the one watching this. It's terrifying.
This is like really intimidating. I was expecting sort of like a light-hearted like discussion about films. No, this is
this is what.
Oh no!
Yeah, you're quite. I mean, I was quite fortunate. I judged for my first few, so I sort of got to know these guys sort of and how they went about it. So, but if I came into this and then Tate was shouting at me, I'd probably be crying by the end of the argument. I think I'd be like, oh no.
It is hard, and the thing is, like, the goal is just not to take it personally. Like,
yeah, definitely.
Oh yeah.
It's just
it's
fun.
also really hard to argue against films that I really like. Like I adore 10 Cloverfield Lane. Like that probably came across too much in my argument. Like, yeah, it's harder than I thought.
yeah, no, it's tough, man.
So, the first round's all done. We have quarterfinals.
George, why couldn't you lose in that top right-hand corner to make it even on that side?
What's not even?
No, why couldn't you have lost in that top right corner? It would have been so much better.
I'm completely lost. Oh, the lines. I was so confused. What's even about this? I was like, so we've got ready for the next round. We'll do a reminder. Cloud Atlas took out the Matrix. Zombieland took out the Avengers. Mad Max destroyed Shaun of the Dead. Terminator destroyed This Is the End. War of the Apes beat Valley. Maybe 28 days later, Interstellar took out Children of Men, and Cloverfield Lane took out Wall-E. Guys, what's the biggest upset so far?
Wall-E.
Cloud Atlas.
Oh, that scrappy little underdog. The thing is, I know I know Wachowski films way too well inside and out, and I think Chris should have argued for maybe one of the latter Matrix films because it actually shows their version of the
where they
apocalypse.
just shoot at machines for like 2 hours
Yes,
straight.
that is their survival, Chris.
Like, the later films are more philosophical. I think there's a lot you could talk about there with the themes and that as well.
I'll say the biggest surprise for me on this list is that Armageddon is not on this list anywhere.
I heard a story. I don't know if it's true, but I heard that somebody once said to Michael Bay, instead of trying to teach, people who know how to drill to be astronauts, why did you not just simply teach astronauts how to use a drill?
If I remember correctly, Michael Bay's response was just "Go fuck yourself."
Yeah. Well, it was not a nice response.
No, wasn't.
I mean, all of these movies are great, but they don't have Aerosmith in the credits, do they? Like, I'm loving Deckard just pointing his gun at that damn dirty ape there in the top right-hand corner of this upcoming round.
Can you imagine if like Deckard had been like the bottom left corner, so every round he goes through, like it's just him shooting at someone, or like Arnie just shooting above him.
Oh man, no, I'm looking forward to this round. This one's going to be good, and we've got some interesting matches in there as well. Like the first round that we'll go back into in a minute is Cloud Atlas versus Zombieland.
You'd never expect that argument to come up.
I'm actually loving these graphics though. Like,
I'll be honest.
So cool about Mad Max and Terminator.
Usually when you look at this bracket, like I'm sure we all do it, we all picture what would go through from what round. I'll be honest, I wasn't expecting Cloud Atlas to go through. I thought the fight was going to be Endgame versus Matrix, which I thought would have been interesting.
I don't think Endgame was going to get that far. I was struggling for picks.
I thought Matrix would have made it to the semi-final against Mad Max. To be honest, that's why I done that side of the bracket.
And maybe too arrogantly, I assumed This Is the End would have took out Terminator, but that was probably just more my personal.
Wow.
I think it's fair going back actually to what we said about the Matrix and that it didn't go through because like a lot of the lore is set up in the sequels. When I mentioned Zion, I think Zion's mentioned by name once or a few times in the first Matrix film. I don't think you actually see Zion until Reloaded.
No, I'm pretty sure he just says, "Oh, by the way, there's some people in Zion."
Yeah, yeah.
They don't mention it at all in the first one, which is why I was saying, Chris, you should really like argue some of the latter Matrix films, which is why I was questioning you at the start when we had a bit of a thumbnail issue. Earlier on today, and I was saying, you sure you want to argue for the first Matrix film, Chris? You have the option here to take the other two Matrix films, which both go heavily into Zion and that apocalyptic side of it. But yeah,
it's true. But say la vie. We have Holly in the comments. She's got her prediction in. She says, "My prediction is that Cloverfield's going to take it." Well,
not if I can.
I'll do my best to not let you down. But I can't promise anything. We'll see what happens. But with all that being said, I think we should move straight into round two then. So we've got
Tate, you have Cloud Atlas, and you are going up against Harry and Zombieland.
Okay, so I'm getting the clock. So Cloud Atlas first, Tate. 1 minute on the clock. Go.
Cloud Atlas showed us two different apocalypses in this film. Both of them are very starkly different. First of all, you have the apocalypse where it's a 1984 style society. We have these clones which are being born into working in restaurants, working as prostitutes, working as all these various different things. Then suddenly one gets enlightened. One sees this film clip which talks about freedom. And it works on that kind of tale of what would happen if clones or robots or something like that gained that sentient kind of freedom. The second apocalypse is the after effect of that. A war breaks out. People start with religions. People gain all this hope and this war and destruction that causes the planet to go into a humongous war and returns it to its original state, into grass states, into vegetation, with that technology edge thrown in of people who are able to escape the conflict. You've got two very different sides here to these apocalypses. You've got the cause and you've got the effect. That's where this film comes in so much better than some of these other apocalyptic films. With Zombieland, it's one note.
I'm 1 minute for Zombieland. Go.
I think you're confusing the various things that Cloud Atlas shows as actual depth. Like, just because it shows a lot of things doesn't mean any of them are particularly well explored. I don't really think any of the actual scenarios outlined are particularly either realistic or interesting. Now, I'm the first to admit Zombieland, not that realistic a film, but that's not its goal. Its goal is just to be an entertaining film about these characters. It has these like nice and slow emotional moments. The story between Woody Harrelson's character and Abigail Breslin's character is the sort of surrogate daughter. This very strange sort of romance between Jesse Eisenberg and Emma Stone. I think it's about the characters in the apocalypse. The apocalypse is there for sure, but it has a much more cohesive tone because it's not trying to explain every little nook and cranny. And Cloud Atlas just goes way too far off the deep end with details that aren't necessary and aren't even like correct. They don't feel as if they're part of the whole. Zombieland has just this much more together atmosphere, this humor, this family vibe. It's just so much more wholesome. And
30 seconds for Cloud Atlas, go.
The thing is with Cloud Atlas, it does aim for something deeper. It is based off a book. It's based off an almost unadaptable book, which aimed to deal with these philosophies, aims to deal with this cause and effect, with things repeating over and over, lives crossing over, star-crossed paths and everything like that. Zombieland is, ha-ha, funny to shoot zombie. Oh, look, we're going to have a family moment. Okay, it's the ending. They're in peril. It's so contrived. We've seen it before in other films, in other genres. They just put zombies on top. Zombies don't even feel like an element past the first half an hour.
Time. 30 seconds, go.
Yeah, it tries to be this amazing deep film about these huge philosophical elements. I wouldn't say that it succeeds. It doesn't get points for trying. Zombieland doesn't try to be anything more than it is. It is just a very consistently excellent, entertaining film. Even in the film itself, it has the whole point. Enjoy the little things. That's what the film is about. It's enjoying the small things after everything goes to shit. Cloud Atlas is just a bleak and depressing film that tries to say something but ends up saying very little at all. Frankly, it's like a 14-year-old being pretentious.
Whoa.
Let's scrub those last two.
Whoa.
Oh, man. Damn. Harry just takes no prisoners. Shit.
We're scratching that comment off the end, right?
We are, yes.
For more than one reason. For more than one reason.
Has anyone decided?
I've got an idea, but I kind of need to have a moment with myself and talk it through.
I have decided. Tate, you defended Cloud Atlas like I knew you would. You love it. There's no doubt about that. It's always passion is a very important thing for this for me. To really get points at. I always do prefer an attack, and I just think Harry's rebuttal just absolutely decimated Cloud Atlas. From someone that's never seen it, that's always heard about it because of Tate, I've not known much, and I've known its reputation, and that's all bias aside. I just thought Harry came in and attacked it too much. The attack on Zombieland wasn't strong enough. I don't think there was as much aim at it as there could have been. I think Harry nabbed it because he made a better attack at Cloud Atlas than your defense was of it.
Okay, I'll go next. I'm in agreement with George, actually. I think Harry absolutely get some ointment for those burns, Tate. Like that was brutal, that rebuttal. And this is coming from someone who loves Cloud Atlas as well. Like I am completely in Tate's corner here. Like Cloud Atlas, I adore that movie. And yes, bring on the 4-hour cut. But I think that Harry did have a very good point in that he was arguing that a lot of the ideas in it are kind of very subjective and you have to kind of arrive at those yourself. And the movie doesn't necessarily give you all that. It gives you like the little pieces and that's it. I just think Harry's argument was stronger. He was saying that it throws you into this world. It's a consistent movie. It doesn't try to be anything that it isn't, and it's about those characters and the importance of those bonds during the time of the apocalypse. So I'm going to give it to Harry on this one.
Yeah, I think not that it matters, but I think I would have swayed towards Harry on that one too. Just again because of the strength of that rebuttal, it was really good. Really coherent as well. I can't speak as well as Harry when he's on fire. He's just sort of like an encyclopedia and he just knows exactly which words to put where. It's crazy. Not to discredit Tate though, because he did, like George said, his passion for the film comes through in spades, and it was a really good argument again. Yeah, I think Harry might have just edged it for me on that, just on the rebuttal alone. I think Tate, maybe you could have sort of dissected Zombieland just maybe a little bit more. That's just
really
for me anyway.
I love Zombieland.
The thing about Zombieland, I think one of its strengths is that it doesn't sort of overstretch itself. It just sets out to do something and it does it. You know what I mean? But I think Cloud Atlas, from what I gather,
I
there's
will
a lot
say,
more.
If you've watched Cloud Atlas, go read the book. and then rewatch the film, you understand a lot more of the elements. And
Yeah,
even
for what it's worth,
I'll be the
they
first
do-
one to admit, when that 4-hour cut comes out, Jesus, I hope they delve into the extra 1.5 hours they left on the cutting room floor, because by God, they have so much they've missed out in the film.
For what it's worth, the film is quite a good adaptation of the book. It's just the book is so dense that you just can't cover it in.
Is this a hashtag release the Wachowski cuts?
This is a hashtag release the Wachowski. Netflix have seen it apparently, and Netflix did have a deal with the Wachowskis when they had Sense8 out, but they
Cool.
never released it.
Just like everyone saw the Snyder cuts, and apparently the JJ cuts, and the anus cut of Cats.
Hashtag release the anus cut of Cloud Atlas.
I'm trying to think which character that'd be, and it's just like, okay. As well, Harry's on fire. Get that trending hashtag.
Is Cloud Atlas the one where Eddie Redmayne plays the weird cat thing?
Eddie Redmayne isn't in Cloud Atlas.
Which is
Might be Jupiter Ascending, maybe.
Yeah.
We're thinking of Jupiter Ascending.
So I just remember they delayed it
Also
to
written by the Wachowskis, wasn't it?
Also, that's the one dud on the Wachowskis banner, I'd say.
Didn't they delay that to release it just before he got his Oscar as a kind of middle finger for the entire film? Like, hey, do you remember that Oscar-winning actor? Here's Jupiter
Yeah, I
Ascending.
don't think I've ever seen such a massive jump in the quality of an actor from with Eddie Redmayne. Like, he has range.
I don't
if
know.
it's good.
I feel like Halle Berry going from winning the Oscar to winning the Razzie the next year was pretty big.
That's true. Yeah, but that
Right.
basketball scene, though.
Oh,
Right, so the next round we have Harry, you're up again. You've got Mad Max Fury Road. You are taking on Chris and Terminator 1. Sorry, I'm so used to saying Terminator Genesis. I almost said it by accident.
it's like The Terminator, 1984, baby. Let's get it done.
Right, Harry, you've got 1 minute on the clock starting now.
The world of Mad Max, I've talked about it already, but it is just stunning. But ignoring the world, the themes of Mad Max are fantastic. It's this amazing deconstruction of the sort of musclehead, toxic masculinity sort of fueled film. And I think it does it that in a fantastic way. Every part of the villainy of the War Boys is a deconstruction of that. They are fueled by this idea of recognition and lust and power and all that sort of stuff. And it is completely turned on its head with the character of Max, who doesn't really care. He's just sort of there. He's trying to survive. And I think that's the entire point of that Apocalypse film. He's just desperately trying to survive, and he will do whatever it takes. However, the film then goes even further than that and shows that what surviving an apocalypse is actually about is the people that you meet and the connections that you forge. And I think that's shown fantastically through Max as this avatar for the character. For a character that has maybe 5 lines of dialogue, he is unbelievably well personified. I think everything about him just really comes through. And Furiosa as well is just...
Chris?
Amazing landscapes notwithstanding, I need more substance in my apocalyptic movie, believe it or not. The plot of Mad Max, there isn't one. They drive somewhere, they change their minds, and they drive back to exactly where they started. That is inherently the plot. And in terms of the characters, it's quite an interesting comparison with the Terminator, and actually in the lead character of Max and obviously the Terminator himself both have very, very few lines of dialogue. But to me, Tom Hardy even pales in comparison to the previous incarnation of Max, played by Mel Gibson. And Arnold Schwarzenegger as the Terminator is infinitely more terrifying and recognizable and has more of an impact on the story itself. Even the war itself, you said that you don't really get much backstory in terms of how this desert is here. It just is, this society is just there. With Terminator, we see the last remnants of humanity still trying to cling on. Yes, they've got laser weapons and there's robots and everything like that, but the war is fought on top of a mountain of a pile of skulls from dead humans. Like that just okay.
Harry?
You talk about how there's no story, it's just going from one place to another. Even George Miller refers to the film as a chase, then a race, because that's what it is, and that's what it's trying to be. It's about these characters. The plot of the film is inconsequential. It's about these people and their journeys and their ideas and their drive to survive. You say that Mad Max isn't as iconic as the Terminator, and you are absolutely correct, but that's not the point of Max. Max is an avatar for the average person, a person who wants to survive and is then forced to realize his own shortcomings and adjust. Furiosa, if anything, is the protagonist.
I don't think the supporting characters in Mad Max are particularly engaging or enthralling to watch, in all honesty. You've got a great performance by Michael Biehn in The Terminator. You've got Linda Hamilton as well, who is amazing in this film, a sort of lowly waitress who eventually becomes the hero for humanity at the end. And I like where The Terminator leaves off as well, in that, yes, they do beat the Terminator, but there is still that uncertainty there and the knowledge that this future is still probably going to come about there. I just think that The Terminator is a much more emotional, impactful story dealing with a real human response.
Oh, fantastic fight.
Well, I thought it'd be very, very difficult for someone to go and fight with what was very clearly everyone's number one pick on their lists. Everyone wanted Mad Max, and Harry just happened to get the random pick of the number one pick. But honest to God, like Chris, you just absolutely just took that completely. Like, your arguments about the different characters that are involved in the film, your arguments about the settings in the film, your arguments about the apocalypse itself, everything was just absolutely on point. And there wasn't really much that Harry could come back with, so I'm giving this one to Chris.
I will say Harry is the scariest fighter I've probably ever gone up against on this entire thing. 23 episodes in, or whatever it is.
Yeah, whenever I'm playing him, I can hear boss music in one ear.
George, you got anything? Or?
I want to talk out loud.
Go on.
Right, I'm torn because
Harry,
both of them here have argued it incredibly well. Both of them haven't really had a fault in their own argument. There is no hole to pick up for any of the two, which is quite rare. For every attack Chris had on Harry, you had a fantastic response, especially with the plot being consequential. However, I didn't feel there was enough attack at Terminator, and this is where I'm torn, because I will always go for an attack. I think Harry's defenses are so strong, but there just wasn't enough put at Terminator. And the more I'm saying this out loud, the more I have to give this one to Chris. This is weird because there was not a single fault on anyone's arguments at all. No one's defense wasn't better than the other. Everything was perfectly balanced as all things should be, which is why I've had to talk out loud to come to an agreement. Does that work? Does that make sense? Yes.
Yeah.
Chris.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I follow you, but I think I actually disagree a bit. I think Harry had one flaw, and he tried to address it twice, and I think he should have brought up Furiosa, who the film is arguably actually about, and he tried to twice, but it was right at the end of his time. So I think if he'd maybe been able to sort of squeeze that in a bit more, I think I would. I mean, Chris has already taken it, but I think I would have given it to Harry if he'd just been able to sort of weave in more talk about Furiosa and how the narrative. He had a really good point about how Max is the avatar for sort of, the general person, and he just happens to be there in the story of these other characters. I think if you just weave that in, I think for me you would have taken it. But yeah, I think just because you didn't quite get the time, I think I have to give this one to Chris.
That was big. Like I said, that's probably one of my favorite arguments I've had in a long time.
Yeah, it was very, very strong from both sides.
Been a long time.
I will say, like, Mad Max as well, just like in terms of a franchise, it just got me thinking when we were saying that it just happens to be an apocalypse. I don't think the films actually go out of their way to explain it even more than that. The first one's just about biker gangs, and then the second one opens and goes.
The second one has
there was an apocalypse that happened, and now everywhere's a desert. It's like
it was basically like nuclear war. Water's a commodity. Let's just go. Let's just get into it.
And then the third movie is basically Hook, right? So it's just insane. I love Thunderdome. Love that movie. Okay, I think this is Interstellar, isn't it? Versus War of the Planet of the Apes.
War of the Planet. Oh God, War of the Planet of the Apes versus Blade Runner. Crikey.
This is a madness.
I don't even know if it's that. Chris, I'm up first.
It's going to be fun.
This one got a timer.
Oh, I can. I've got one. And 1 minute whenever you're ready. Go.
Right. War of the Planet of the Apes is the finale in a trilogy. I'm not going to talk about the other two films because I really can't. I'm going to talk about Andy Serkis for a minute, the godfather of motion capture, one of the most important actors in cinema over 20 years. What he manages to do with this technology, what the technology has been able to do with him, is put him into this higher level where this is his industry now. He has his own motion capture company, and the character of Caesar performs well. He should have been nominated for Oscars in 2 of these 3 films. Definitely this one for actor. He was absolutely phenomenal. And I think the power of the performance can be enough to take you through a film. Now, as well as having a performance, you need a very, very good story. And they have this. They have the remnants of the human beings left on Earth. They've got the apes rising. The humans are living in fear. There's a virus that's going to come and get them. Not coronavirus, it's ape virus. And I think this is a perfect balance of exploring that apocalypse, the frailties of humanity. They're all scared. They're killing them. They'd rather kill themselves. Even Woody Harrelson doesn't want to return. He'd just rather shoot himself in the head.
And then 1 minute, go.
Yes, the motion capture's great, but I mean, motion capture's been going since Phantom Menace and has just got better and better, but we pretty much hit that peak way before War for the Planet of the Apes. You could even argue for like Rise of the Planet of the Apes, for example. Like, good CGI does not amazing character make. And in terms of Blade Runner, if we are going with the visual effects thing, practical effects merged with special effects and the cityscape of Blade Runner and the world that is created, this post-apocalyptic, this dystopian future that is created by Ridley Scott is phenomenal and has been replicated many, many times, but has never come quite to the quality the first Blade Runner film made. The feel, the atmosphere, everything, it creates a world. It puts you into a world with the music as well. Vangelis' score, just the aesthetic of everything is one of the most unique movies out there as this glimpse into the future and where humanity's ended up. It's kind of like Star Wars in a way, the original Star Wars, in that it's similar but different. You can see where we've progressed almost. You can see elements that are familiar.
And time. Rebuttal, go.
Motion capture, it's great, it's fantastic. So is this film. My issue is the score. Michael Giacchino's score is fantastic. It makes you cry at times. You don't get that Vangelis. Vangelis has scope, that's great. My issue with Blade Runner is there are like 7 cuts of Blade Runner, at least 7 cuts of Blade Runner. And when you've got so many changes, which version do we talk about, which this, that, it constantly changes and every version affects the same film. It's not clear which is the correct thing. It is now. There's one version of Planet of the Apes, and that version of Planet of the Apes is what the director intended to give us, and that is what we got, and that's what makes it post-apocalypse.
War for the Planet of the Apes didn't really need any additional cuts, though, because it was very much fundamentally a standard by-the-numbers movie. Blade Runner, if anything, the changes that were made to that with the final cut enhanced the movie and the themes within the movie and the question of identity, what it is to be human, what it is to be man, and machine, and questioning identity in this world with replicants and humans and some trying to live together in harmony, essentially, in these uncertain times of the future. I think the cuts do embellish that world, and I do think that it does help the movie overall in terms of its quality and its impact afterwards.
Wolf and time.
Oh, that's hard. That's very hard. Did Tom fight Blade Runner once and he just couldn't say anything?
That's like one of his favorite films, isn't it? I think.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
No, he destroyed it. I had Blade Runner Tears and Rain, and he completely destroyed it.
Yeah, he had ammunition for days on that movie.
He really did. He went in hard, and
I'm that movie, but
I'm pretty sure he went off stream afterwards and probably cried for about an hour.
I think when you love a film so much, you have to know what people dislike.
You know everything that's wrong with it.
Yeah. I love The Last Jedi. Let's discuss.
See, with this film, there was loads of parts of the arguments, and we have to base it off the arguments. There's a lot here which I wish I could go off opinion on. Your comment on there being no part of Vangelis' score where you'd cry. Are you fucking kidding me? Tears and Rain, man. Like, the songs even got tears in the name of it. If we're basing off the arguments alone, there is a very clear film which I prefer out of these two. Very, very clear. There's a very clear argument which I prefer out of these two, and that is George's, which is weird because I'm still not fully convinced on Planet of the Apes as a film to go and watch, whereas I'm already convinced to go and see Blade Runner. But the argument itself, the way that you just defended it, talked about just the score and how passionate you were about it, how it is the last remnant of society, how about it's more of an apocalyptic film than what Chris kind of went for. Chris went for the angle of it's a great film and went with that angle and mentioned once it was post-apocalyptic in this argument. Whereas George, you focused on it a little bit more, which gave it a little bit more of a rounder argument, more to actually argue about. So I'm going to give it to you.
I can go next if you want.
Yeah, please. I'm still thinking.
Yeah, okay. Well, I'm actually going the complete opposite way. I think George's opening argument, I think he mostly just talked about CGI for like a good portion of it. I don't know. It's a valid point, but I think that when you talk, I mean, when you're comparing CGI, Blade Runner was groundbreaking at the time as well. So I think that sort of argument is a little bit inconsequential. I think Chris sort of argued more about like what the film represented and what it stood for, whereas I think George argued more sort of what it is physically and how it's sort of tangible. So I think Chris just takes it for me, but I understand it's the second round. It's so hard to come up with sort of new points that you haven't brought to the table already. So I think Chris just did that slightly better for me. But again, it's the second round is so hard.
Well, I wish I'd gone before now.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, honestly, it's really hard to say. I think George's opening argument was really strong. In particular, I really loved his rebuttal, talking about the different cuts of Blade Runner, because that's something I thought about.
Yeah,
as well.
sorry to interject. That was a
I think
phenomenal
Chris
point.
came back with a really good response in that Planet of the Apes doesn't require one. I thought that was a really, really good rebuttal, and I think on those grounds, I think I'm going to have to give it to Chris.
Fair play.
For the record, I think I'm still undecided whether I like the final cut of Blade Runner. I think
I love
he basically took B-roll from Legend with the unicorn and just like slapped it into the movie and just said, like, interpret this.
I'm a huge Blade Runner fan, but I've never actually seen the 2007 alleged final cut. I've seen the other versions. I've never actually seen that one.
The most recent one I saw was the director's cut from like 1996.
Yeah, I think.
I saw the final cut in cinema, which would have been the anniversary. That was fantastic to see up on the screen.
Yeah.
Can I just say this?
But I'm in that controversial party that actually prefers 2049 to the original. So we'll argue that for another day.
I've been meaning to rewatch 2049 for so long, but I really want to be in the right mood. As in, like,
it's an outstanding film.
Up on every viewing.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite films of this decade. 2049. It doesn't have the right to be as good as it is for a sequel of, one of the greatest sci-fi, one of the greatest films ever made. But I think it goes toe to toe with it on every point for my money anyway. I think 2049, when you've got a sequel like that, that's exactly what you want the follow-up to be.
I wonder whether they'll do a third film.
No, please no.
No, I was too nervous for this one coming out. I can't take the nerves if they're going to ruin it again.
And we know that the third one's
June coming out soon, haven't we? So that'll be basically the same thing.
Yeah. Okay, so Blade Runner goes through in, well, I'd say, as far as quadrants are concerned, looking at the start, I'd probably say the top right would be the most competitive. Out of all of them. Maybe possibly bottom left would be as competitive, but it's really difficult to tell.
It was very hard to throw shade at Blade Runner.
Yeah, I don't envy you there.
There's clinging at straws and there's telling someone there's 7 cuts of the film.
How many cuts are there?
We're all just really hoping for all these other directors' cuts to be released.
How many actual cuts of Blade Runner are there?
Google said at least 7, which is why I then said at least 7. Right.
Release the butthole cut or whatever it's called.
Oh, I hope we have to argue Star Wars at some point, because remember this day. I will use that argument against you, George.
Which one?
Lord of the Rings has got 2. You've got what? I've lost count at this point for Star Wars.
Well, we've had the final George Lucas cut now, which is on Disney Plus, which he'd done before he sold the company.
Oh, the McClunky cut.
He's only changed in all 6 films, but they're calling it the final George Lucas cut.
I love it.
It's like every new era, you've got here's your special edition cinema, here's your DVD changes, here's your Blu-ray changes, here's your 4K changes. 8K is just going to be like we recast someone.
He's going to have Ewan McGregor playing Obi-Wan in A New Hope. That's what's going to happen.
Okay. The last fight of this second round is between Interstellar and 10 Cloverfield Lane.
Can I stop fighting? I'm so done with it. I'm on the ropes.
Ryan, do you have...
Yeah, I can pull up the time. Gotta say, it's actually deceptively difficult to time keep and try and take in the arguments. I didn't. It's not something I considered before.
Put my phone up near there so I can listen and stare in the corner of my eye.
Yeah. All right. Okay. So 1 minute on the clock. Whenever you're ready.
Interstellar first.
Okay. Right. Are you ready? Sorry.
Yeah. I was going to start as soon as you started talking.
Right. Interstellar. Christopher Nolan. So. We know this is an apocalyptic film. However, the key core story beat of this is about a father and his daughter. Yes, he had a son and they ignored him. He's a bit of an asshole. It's all about Murph. That's why her name's said 100 times at the end. and it's about saving civilization. And this, it just happened to be this great pilot's daughter was the one to do it. And yes, there are some clunky parts in there, like the bookcase bit, but that's through the power of love, said Anne Hathaway once. The more interesting thing on this is the apocalyptic angle of it all. You've got the dust storm. We are seeing Earth dying. We accept that Earth is dying. And it just gives you that desperation to see them survive. And what it does, it gives stakes to it. Because Matthew McConaughey, he just saves the Earth. He doesn't want to save the Earth. He wants to save his daughter. And his daughter, on the other side, on Earth, wants to save him. It's a duo combination scene. Chris Nolan wrote this when he gave birth. Well, he didn't give birth. When his wife gave birth to a daughter. And you can see the personal family relationship within this. And that's what towers it through. You need the apocalyptic angle, but you need to believe in these characters.
And time.
I think these are very similar in that they focus on a very small of a big whole, but I think with Interstellar, it kind of harms the movie a little bit. The entire premise of the movie is trying to save humanity, but we never really get a good look at humanity. We never really get to see what does society look like now? How do things work? We do very much just focus on this small farm in the middle of nowhere and a father and daughter story, which, is a fair story to tell, but it doesn't really give gravitas to the ending of the world or the Earth ending. And I don't think you ever really get that impression from Interstellar. You just get a couple of sandstorms and then you're in space for the rest of the movie. 10 Cloverfield Lane doesn't really show the rest of humanity because it does bring you into that isolation of this homestead. And even a family is almost created, this weird kind of uncomfortable family. John Goodman at the head of this household, going from moments of pure joy and this family bond. They're all sitting around playing board games, and on the flip of a dime, he can just snap and flip that table over. And be absolutely...
The issue with 10 Cloverfield Lane is that it's this perfect setup. It's brilliant. It leaves you question things. The moment she goes outside, takes you out of the film. If that just finished ambiguously with her going outside and us never knowing what happens, the final sort of 10-15 minutes, that to me undoes the brilliance of the first part, keeping you in that sort of claustrophobic environment. That's what builds that film, but the ending really lets it down, and to me that's what put me off 10 Cloverfield Lane. Meanwhile, Interstellar, you have the
I think the journey of 10 Cloverfield Lane is much more profound and definitely does elevate a slightly lackluster ending in the ending of the film. I think it's very believable as an apocalyptic film in terms of the isolation, the claustrophobia, and the uncertainty and unnerving quality the film manages to maintain as well. That's very difficult for any film to maintain, let alone for the entire running time. Interstellar is a fine sci-fi movie, but in terms of apocalyptic film, it is kind of just a father and daughter story with a time-traveling plot line that's thrown in at the end that thinks it's smarter than it is, and goes on for way too long and outstays its welcome.
Good fight.
That was a very good fight.
I'm done.
You're up again in a second, mate.
I'm out of water as well. I'm burning up in here.
Hey, you've got semi-finals guaranteed.
That was a good fight.
Does anyone want to go first?
Go on, I'll go first. I think, oh god, it's difficult because it was such a well contested. I didn't. No disrespect to sort of Interstellar, I think George has argued it way better than I thought anyone would have been able to consider it sort of as an apocalyptic film more than a sci-fi film, if you're with me there. But I think what wins it over for me is I think Chris just sort of made a more compelling argument when he said, it's a story about a family, whereas Cloverfield is a story that I think you can, as the audience, you're sort of more on tenterhooks with. I think the point that Chris made, I think it's harder to sort of almost relate to the sort of personal struggle of Matthew McConaughey's character unless you have a daughter perhaps. Whereas Cloverfield Lane, anyone can put themselves in the scenario where they're in sort of isolation like that. So I think for me, Chris just wins that one. But again, it was very, very close.
Harry,
wouldn't this be awkward if we had like a 2-hour stream and like we just couldn't decide at one point, so we just sat in silence for like an hour or so?
Quiet reflection time.
You go, Harry.
All right. Yeah, I think I've got to give it to Chris as well. The arguments were so good on both sides, and even talking, I'm not 100% sure, so I might change my mind at the end of this as I sort of talk it out. But I think like the idea that Chris talked about as well is that both films have lackluster endings. So I think the argument that George had about 10 Cloverfield Lane being let down by his ending is absolutely fair, but Interstellar doesn't come off any better in that regard. And I think Chris's arguments about how the initial part is a lot more ambitious and the sort of in the themes and the ideas and the sort of like psychological thriller aspect of it. I think that really sort of puts it above, in my opinion. So I'm going to stick with Chris.
I know it doesn't matter, but I probably would have also gone with Chris. I thought his opening argument was a lot stronger than yours, George. And even though the rebuttals were pretty even, the opening argument won it.
I mean, I've never seen 10 Cloverfield Lane, so I can't really go against it, can I?
I mean, we'd all highly recommend it.
I knew you were going to go for the ending. I know you were going to go straight for the ending. I was like, I can't even argue that fact because I agree.
And then I realised instantly, I was like, oh shit, I was like, I need to make my own dig at the Anne Hathaway speech. Quickly. It's not its finest moment. So that is the semi-final. Not semi-finals, that's the quarterfinals. Crikey, I'm losing the plot of me. Give me a couple of seconds. I will have a nice photo.
If it helps, I'm completely out. Cloud Atlas was my last hope.
I am out too, I think.
Do you know what's really weird? I can never keep track of. I can never keep track of like who's got what.
George, George, fuck, you're out.
I mean, I'm the damage is done. I took out Children and Men. I deserve a trophy for that.
Is this the first time you've been out before the semi-finals?
No, God, no. It happened loads. I've just never done a round one. That's what I was scared about after the first two fights.
Yeah, good point.
No, I've never gone out in round one. I'm a lot better than that.
Sadly, I'm part of that club.
That was the Amelie.
What was sort of between rounds? Chris, did you want to like run and grab a drink or something?
Yeah, I'm going to go and do this up. I will say I'll bring the comment up really quickly. You guys can talk about it. I don't know if we're going to do the announcement now or not. Sheila says, I think you should bring back the drink while watching videos. They were hilarious. I'll pass it over to the guys that might be able to announce something.
Yes, so on a date that hasn't been distinguished yet, we are going to be doing a drunk watch-along of Cats, the 2019 film. We've already got the rules up if we wanted to go through them. But we're going to all get onto a live stream. We're going to do what we used to do with Timestamp Zero, which was a series we used to have, where basically we all set the timestamps of the film to 0. We click play at the same time and we watch it along. We commentate on it. We have some fun. We chat shit. Like it's just a fun event overall. But we're going to do it drunk whilst watching Cats. So the drinking rules for when we finally get around to doing it is every time a cat introduces themselves by name or by song, then you have to drink. Every time they drink milk on screen, you have to drink your drink. Drink whenever two cats nuzzle each other. Drink whenever cat strips on screen. And yes, that actually happens a couple of times in the film. And drink whenever a cat magically disappears. Which also randomly happens quite a lot in the film. I think it's going to be a blast. I've seen Cats, and I'll be honest, the only way that I can get through it for a second viewing is whilst drunk. I may be drunk beforehand and get more drunk whilst viewing, as it might be the only way to actually get through it. But if you guys jump along to live stream, you can set your timestamp to 0, and we can just have a general chit-chat about how shit Cats is. As a film.
I don't know. I don't think it's that bad. I watched it on an airplane last week, and there were only 4 walkouts. I don't think you heard. I don't think you heard my joke.
Wherever you were watching it.
Don't think you heard my joke. So
no, I didn't know.
I said I was on an airplane, and there were only 4 walkouts.
Right, I have not seen it. I probably won't be getting drunk to it. I'll probably just have 4 pints of milk just to go along with the happening.
Just have some White Russian.
Stick some rum in there at least.
Can you wait till they find out, like, oh, we've got a supermarket shortage of milk? Because, yeah, he just bought them all stream Cats.
Here's the thing, though. If we drink milk during that means if we ever do anything with Clockwork Orange, we can't drink milk for that. So I think we should reserve
a milk drinking watch along with Clockwork Orange. I feel like that is also on the cards at some point.
Right, guys, we have the semi-finals lined up. We have Harry and Zombieland versus Chris and Terminator. Chris has done it. He's got 3 in the semis. I've literally just realised. He has a Blade Runner and 10 Cloverfield Lane in the second one. So, Chris, we're going to give you a choice. Do you want to pass over one of the 2 for the second semi to somebody else?
I feel like that should be a thing. You shouldn't just like...
Yeah. We do normally. I think once or twice we've just had someone self-declare the final, which is I'm fine with. But if he wants someone else to fight it, it's Chris's call. But he will be back for the final, though, if he does win.
Ryan, how do you feel about fighting? Getting stuck in, or are you happy just judging this time?
I'm just not very well versed with Tenko. I don't feel like I could do it just.
I was going to give you Blade Runner. I was going to give you Blade Runner, but
Oh god, oh that's a lot of pressure.
okay, no worries,
You've got
no
the
worries.
golden egg there. I wouldn't. So.
Next time, this it feels like War Machine at the end of Iron Man. Like, oh, next time we definitely do need to get Ryan on a fight at some point.
100%.
Tate, how do you feel about arguing for Blade Runner? As you came to my aid about Vangelis' score and Tears in Rain.
Yeah, sure, go for it.
Awesome. Okay, we've got it sorted. Oh,
Right,
it means
so-
we've got to fight Harry again now. What the hell?
Harry's doing very well. I'm not going to lie. I don't think anyone probably thought Zombieland would get to the semi-finals. He has done an exceptional job. So we're going to go.
I let myself down really with Mad Max, so it balances out.
I don't think you let yourself down. I think it was just it was just a really well contested
Good
thing,
argument.
I think. Yeah.
Very rarely the favorite wins as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I
think
remember. Yeah.
Very rarely.
The only obvious one was the interrogation scene from The Dark Knight for best comic book movie moment. Was it?
Mhm.
There's maybe been one other obvious one, but I'm struggling to think. You guys?
Yeah, no, I can't think of any more. I think that was definitely the standout. Comic book movie when we did that, which sadly never got aired. That was
Who won that?
one.
Dark Knight went out first round to Batman Begins.
Yeah, there you go.
John Wick went out best movie badass early. Best villain. That's a bit controversial. I know I won that, but I did pick Schindler's List, which I did kind of regret. I realized like 2 rounds in, like no one can argue against this because he's a horrible human being.
Yeah, you kind of rode off the coattails of millions of lives in that.
Yeah,
Really.
you couldn't really like go against it. Like, why isn't he the bad villain? Yeah. But no, this is going to be very interesting. So, a minute on the clock, Chris. You prepare to fight for your life.
Okay.
You've got another 3 rounds of doing it. Yes, 3. Right. So, Harry, you are up first for Zombieland. You've got 1 minute on the clock. Go.
I think I've talked a lot about the strength of Zombieland and that it's about community and family and things like that. And so I'm going to go a little bit more on the attack here against Terminator in that it really misses the point. Like, it's supposed to be this story about like the savior of humanity, and it's so unrelatable. Like, none of the characters to me are remotely engaging. Like, I don't personally believe that Kyle Reese or Sarah Connor have really any chemistry or any business doing what they're doing. The whole sense of, I mean, obviously a film about a robot traveling back in time and murdering people is going to be quite silly and quite unrealistic, but I still think even within like the sort of constrained sense that Terminator brings, it just doesn't really have any sort of connection to it. Whereas Zombieland, it has the perfect sort of blend of exactly what it's going for. It has the humor, it has the heart, it has these little interconnections, these little moments that really ground it as sort of being, well, ultimately, obviously unrealistic, something that is feasible within the constraints of its own universe.
I would completely disagree with that. I think, especially the Terminator, Sarah Connor is very relatable. She is literally just a lowly diner. She's working minimum wage at a diner. Like, she is just a working girl, essentially. And then this guy, Carl Reese, comes along and makes a very compelling argument about the future. And I do think they have tremendous chemistry. Yes, they don't spend much time together in the grand scheme of things, but I think the time that they do is much more compelling than many films deal with that kind of time frame. He shows sympathy, he shows empathy, and he's known about her this whole time. So he does have some kind of history and knowledge of Sarah Connor before going into this whole thing. With Zombieland, yes, the camaraderie between the main characters is great, but I never really feel the tension there. I never feel like any of them could die at any point. There's a moment towards the end where they all get cornered, but they all make it out unscathed. There's no gravity, there's no loss or sacrifice to the whole, to this apocalypse that is happening. When Kyle Reese dies, well, they're being pursued the entire movie, and in any one moment they could get shot, they could get run over, they could get killed by
You're talking about how you don't think there's any tension in Zombieland or that no one's going to die. Yeah, obviously, that's not the point of the film. The film is a comedy. It's lighthearted. It's fun. That's the entire point of the film. Like, if halfway through the film, all of a sudden Woody Harrelson gets his like insides ripped out by Zombieland, and they all start around crying, and the rest of the film's a funeral, that would somewhat dampen the tone a little bit, which I don't really think is what they were going for. Whereas Terminator, it has these clashing of tones that I think really just sort of makes, whereas Zombieland is just consistent. It knows exactly what it's doing it, and it's doing it very, very, very well.
I think Terminator's equally consistent in its own genre, but you talk about there being a funeral scene that could dampen the spirits of the movie. Bill Murray dies halfway through the movie, and it's heartbreaking. But I think that Zombieland could have gone those places. You talk about these nice, tender moments of character that it has. Yes, it does, and it balances that with comedy, but it could have gone that extra mile. It could have been so much more than what it was. Terminator is an outstanding movie in the sci-fi genre, in the apocalypse genre, gives a very bleak and believable look into the future. If machines were to rise up, for example, and the human, the last, man, Jesus, those 30 seconds just go. Can we switch it? Can we have 30 seconds first and then a minute afterwards?
That was hard. Has anyone come to a decision?
Yeah,
I feel like
I feel like Chris won me over with that rebuttal there. Honestly, like the attack there was that Terminator, what was it, like Ben didn't have like contrasting tones and stuff like that. It had too many contrasting tones and everything like that. And Chris talking about how Zombieland could have benefited more by having some change of tone, not contrasting tones, but a change of tone, really kind of set home the point that Terminator has a lot more to talk about. And Zombieland, in the end, is just a zombie film. So I'm going to give it to Chris.
So I'm going to do my thoughts out loud. Unless, Ryan, you've made your mind.
No, go ahead, dude.
So I thought this was pretty neck and neck. And then when Chris said that no one died, all Harry, all he had to say was Bill Murray died.
Yeah.
And then Chris said it in his rebuttal, which helps Chris's argument. So I'm going to give it to Chris for that. If you'd literally just said that, I think you'd have won that. Again, such well fought. And you had Zombieland against Terminator. It's the defense of Zombieland's incredible. The fact that it doesn't need stuff to die, it's comedy and stuff. But I think Chris had in there, bringing in the Bill Murray thing was the kind of that was your power punch. Like if you'd have brought Bill Murray, you've won. Like you haven't said his name yet, you can win the whole thing with Bill Murray. But Chris, you've got my one for that one.
Okay. And we do
Ryan,
yeah, I think I would have gone for Chris just to echo what George just said. The Bill Murray point. I thought Harry was sort of holding on to Bill Murray to sort of drop it now, like right as the arguments at a crescendo. But I think it was, I don't know. I think the way Chris sort of handled that rebuttal of it, and I think Chris got not lucky, but I think Chris had the foresight to quickly bring it up himself and sort of get that out of the way. So I think Chris's rebuttal was quite strong. But again, like through no fault of your own, Harry, because you're up against this big sort of epic.
You're up against the Terminator.
Yeah, the Terminator. Yeah.
I guess this means Chris wins. This has happened before, where after the first argument, I think the first ever battle, I had 3 in the final 4, and I had 3 basically. 1 already through to the final, and then 2 which I had to argue for myself, and then I passed it on to someone else.
That's what we normally do. I mean,
yeah.
That was your one win until a year ago.
Yeah, it was. 8 months. I'm still reigning. Oh, wait, no, technically I'm no longer reigning champion. Until this video is over, I'm still reigning champion.
I will say, though, that when we used to do them pretty regular, like we didn't do them like every month. I think there was a point where we probably did, but then we kind of did it every other month. You did kind of get into a groove of it. You had the practice, but having that 8 months gap, it's sort of like you're greasing the groove again. You're trying to,
see which arguments work, see which approaches work to the arguments and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I mean, I think, Harry, for a debut, you've done exceptionally well.
Yeah,
possibly one of the better debuts on the channel.
Yes. I mean, Brian said it all.
He could have won the whole thing, so
Ryan got to judge for a couple of goes before he went in, and he went in with Game of Thrones, which he just wiped everyone out with.
You say that, but I had the biggest faux pas in history where I forgot who I was arguing against. It was Ned Stark. It haunts my very dreams. I had Ned Stark, a surefire semi-finalist, and I flubbed it. I forgot who I was arguing against. I thought I was arguing against Cersei Lannister, but I think it was somebody else. It was just terrible. It's so humiliating.
I think you wouldn't have Pedro Pascal, the Mandalorian.
Yeah, to be fair.
Right. So let's get the next semi-final under the way. Tate, you're arguing for Blade Runner.
Yep.
You are going against Chris and 10 Cloverfield Lane. You got 1 minute.
Ollie down with this one. Ollie won the to win.
Tate, you're up first. You've got 1 minute. Go.
So we've talked about the different apocalypses that have been depicted in all of these films across the entire bracket for so long now. So I want to focus in a little bit more on the actual filming itself, because we talked about Apocalypse, we compared those things. Let's go into the actual film itself. Blade Runner is an absolute classic. You can't beat it, you can't fault it. It has so much cultural impact on what we look at sci-fi as today. Almost every single sci-fi film from today will take some element of Blade Runner into it. It will take some inspiration from a film that took inspiration from a film that took inspiration from Blade Runner itself. It was genre defining. I've seen loads of different bottle episodes in TV, like The Fly in Breaking Bad and stuff like that, which try to encapsulate the same thing that was done in this episode, and it feels like it's just a TV script that has been adapted to the big screen, including down to the ending, which feels a little bit too high budget, but the script really does falter in some places in this one. You have two characters holding up the entire story of 10 Cloverfield Lane. There is 3 in the bunker, remember?
Hey. Chris, you got an extra 5 seconds for that.
I think it's awkward in the fact that in Blade Runner, even the characters that aren't meant to be machines feel like machines. It's a very dreamlike state kind of movie, and there aren't any performances, with the exception of maybe one, which is the late, great Rutger Hauer. Everyone is just kind of one note and mundane in this film. In 10 Cloverfield Lane, you have so much empathy, concern, and you genuinely are championing for Mary Elizabeth Winstead character to get out of this situation she finds herself in. She's in a car crash. She wakes up chained to a pipe in this random basement, and then we discover and try and work out what's gone on with the world and the current situation of everything as she does, which is a great storytelling tool. You're not kind of exposition dumped or anything like that. You are drips and drabs throughout the movie, which makes her a more compelling character and which makes the situation, the plight of the character, and the apocalyptic world that the world frames much more interesting. You are left guessing this entire movie as she's trying to discover this mystery, unravel what has gone on. You've got this very conflicting character of John Goodman. You don't know if he's a good man. No pun intended. Okay. Oh, damn it. I was okay.
Hey.
You didn't even mention the third character in the bunker. You haven't in any of your arguments yet. Did he have a single good line of dialogue in the film? I doubt it. Blade Runner looks to tackle what it is to be human, what it is to be alive, what it is to feel, what it is to love, what it is to touch. 10 Cloverfield Lane is a film put in a situation. You put someone into a bottled environment, put someone into that kind of environment, and let's see what happens. There's a bit of paranoia, there's a bit of other things going on. Oh, we'll find it out in the end. Blade Runner keeps you guessing.
I'd say that Blade Runner's much more sort of elaborate with its philosophical questions and everything like that, but stripping this down to best apocalyptic movie, I think that what the first 3/4 of 10 Cloverfield Lane deals with is a very believable situation. It's filled with uncertainty, mood swings, constant mood swings. It's threatening, then he's loving, he's almost like a father, and then he's acting really lecherous in parts as well. It's this very uneasy atmosphere that the movie maintains, which makes it a very enjoyable watching experience. Okay.
Chris, I know it doesn't matter because you got 2 people going through to the final, but if 10 Cloverfield Lane goes through to the final, please talk about more than just John Goodman.
Okay, I mentioned Mary Elizabeth.
Who's the third character, Chris?
He's there. He's a guy.
He's...
He contributes something to the story.
My favourite part of that is John Goodman a good man?
I got fun as well, man.
That's iconic.
Is anyone decided? I thought I'm gonna just talk out loud. Considering he had like no prep, he was just thrust in like argue against 10 Cloverfield Lane. I liked his comment about who's the third man. I just thought Chris had a stronger argument. I don't think that's down to any fault of Tate's. I just think that Tate's have been like thrown in at the last minute for it, and it was more of a stronger idea of the apocalyptic film. So I think I'm going to give this one to 10 Cloverfield Lane.
I had kind of the opposite impression. I thought Tate came in with like a really, really good argument. I thought, especially considering it was so last minute. And I think that while Chris had a really strong sort of defense of the film in general, he never really defended against the points that Tate was levering at him. Like the whole point again about the third man, like Chris just ignored that and pretended that hadn't been said. Didn't defend it at all. So, me, on that basis, I'd have to give it to Tate.
Can I just ask Chris? What is Mary Elizabeth Winstead's character's name without Googling it?
Ooh. Ooh.
Been a while since I've seen the movie.
Wait, without Googling,
Not-
Chris. Quick answer
No,
right now.
I'm
Come
not,
on,
I'm
chop,
not
chop.
Googling. I'm not Googling.
Not the Huntress, as they would say.
Mary? I don't know.
It's Michelle.
Oh, it begins with M. It's halfway there.
No, I think again it argued phenomenally, but I think I'm going to give it to Tate. I can't believe how well he was able to come in on such, with no prep whatsoever. And I know it's a film that's probably, I think any of us here could sort of defend it on a whim, but I think Tate did it exceptionally well. And I think Harry said, Chris just sort of had to ignore the fact that there was this character in this movie that just contributed, absolutely nothing. So
he died in the movie. It was for shock value. He died. Yeah. I ain't going to argue with that. There's few too many cooks in the kitchen.
Yeah.
Despite there being a cast of 3.
Who's the third man, Chris?
Is this the one that was on
right now? Because I feel really bad because he's probably a swell guy. John Gallagher Jr. Yeah, I've got nothing. I don't know what this guy's been in. Let me check this guy's credentials.
He been in?
No, they killed him for real in the film. That's the issue.
Yeah, I haven't seen this guy in anything.
What's he been in?
Oh, he's in Jonah Hex apparently from 2010. Remember that cinematic gem?
Oh, he's been in Westworld for 2 episodes.
Oh, there you go. Oh, 1 episode he's been in Westworld.
Oh, yeah. No, 2 episodes. Oh, credit only. Okay, yeah, you're right.
So this guy hasn't done much, okay, but I'm sure like he's an all right bloke. But
He's a good man, would you say?
He was moving swiftly on. What we got next?
It's the final.
We have Terminator versus Blade Runner. Chris, are you going to keep Tate's Terminator? Not Terminator, sorry.
He's on that one.
I forgot to align as my bad.
I feel like to make it fairer, I feel like Chris should face a different argument from Blade Runner. So I'm going to pass off Blade Runner to anyone who wants to take it, and take a different direction with it, because I have a pretty much the same argument in my head that I would have gone for again, harkening back the points and just arguing it against Terminator. But if anyone has a different angle, then chop up now. You can have it.
Harry, I fancy a boss fight. What you say? I
can give it a go. I love Blade Runner, so
if it helps, I need to go to the toilet, so you guys can have a little bit of prep time for the final.
Cool.
We'll stall some time. So, guys, biggest upset of the entire night so far. What would you guys say? I'm still going with Children of Men.
Do you have the bracket to bring up again? Sorry, just while we talk about upset.
I do. Let me quickly load it up. Bear with me, guys. So, if we have a quick look, it's a lot better now. We can do it on stream. So we had really quickly. I mean, Zombieland took. None of us thought Carts would get past round 1. So I guess that's a kind of like a tick for itself, maybe.
Yeah, that's what you say. Yeah, I didn't anticipate it doing quite as.
I just don't know why. I've not seen it, but I know Tate loves it, which is why we got picked more so than itself as being a good film.
Honestly, fundamentally, I was surprised that Blade Runner managed to be 28 Days Later. I think as an apocalyptic movie, I think 28 Days Later, that's got to be in your top 5, right? If you're thinking of movies to do with that whole thing. But I'm
surprised that like the final is between the Terminator and Blade Runner, both of which, like, while have apocalypses in them, really aren't about apocalypses, like, at all.
Yeah.
Also, the OCD is killing me here. Can we get a strike through Wall-E at all?
Oh my god! I must have moved on by mistake.
That's just the OCD. We do have a question actually, so we could fill time with this. Brinsley says, you could have mentioned the multiple versions of Blade Runner, which we did, but which one would you call the best? The filmmaker himself couldn't even make up his mind.
I've only seen the final cut, so I can't give a fair answer.
I've only seen the final cut, but I know like what was changed between the different cuts. I think that. I think Final Cut is the safest one to watch, but I do think that with that B-roll footage of Legend just thrown into it with the unicorn, which obviously ties in with the origami figure at the end, that it's not even up for debate at that point. Take 2049 out of the equation. Deckard is, he is a replicant at the end of that movie. Like that dream that he has basically suggests that. There's no two ways around that. Whereas I think if you take that scene out, which I think was in the director's cut, which left out the unicorn stuff, I think there's more dilemma there. There's more of a question there at the end of the movie. as to whether he is, more than a man, or maybe he could be a man. I think there's more ambiguity there essentially in the director's cut than the final cut. But I know that the final cut, just by definition, by the title, is going to be people's preferred cut and the one that's most available to buy.
Okay, before we go into the final fight, I do have one thing to say to everyone. Wash your hands, stay home, and if you got friends who are putting up their board on Facebook, like I've just looked at my Facebook feed, then tell them to go and watch Cinema Savvy, because we've got hours of entertainment back catalogued for you guys to go through and watch if you wanted to. I mean, there's 21 other Battle of the Brackets to go through. They're about 2 hours each. There you go. That's your days sorted.
That's our shameless plug right there, everyone.
if you really want to watch it, if you go to the first few episodes, you will see a disgusting Photoshop, which is what the original Photoshop was, where it was literally a white background, a logo, and lines. And every week there was no squares. I would just find a photo and try and crop it in, and it was just a catastrophe. It literally probably took about 6 episodes for us to get an actual proper background and system, and then it was probably about 7 episodes after where the squares came in. But I know, definitely watch them because they're always fun. They're lively.
Every single one of them seems to be very different, which is strange. Yeah,
the closest we've had to copying was Comic Book Movie and Comic Book Movie Moment, but Comic Book Movie we had to delete the morning after because the audio didn't work.
Yeah,
that's the only. So really, it wasn't. You're not going to see the same thing twice.
There you go.
We've got some Game of Thrones specials, Star Wars specials, Harry Potter specials.
Corona is the virus. We get the cure.
Have you guys ever done a TV?
First one we ever did, I think.
First one we did.
And then
Game of Thrones.
We've done
I mean, I've got. Should I do a quick shameless plug of every episode we've done? Just
go for it. Go for it.
I'm not going to go over winners.
They're all in a playlist, so easily accessible.
Have you got the winners as well up for them?
No, because I'm not going to spoil it for them. I'm going to watch. Best TV moment, best sports moment. So all of these are film, unless there's telly. Best TV moment, best sports moment, best sci-fi film or sci-fi moment, don't know. Best soundtrack, best comic movie, which we know didn't air. Best Disney song, best Harry Potter character, best Star Wars character, best Star Wars moment. All of these are before Rogue One, I want to say, or Last Jedi. Best film to get nominated for best film at the Oscars that didn't win best film at the Oscars or something long like that. Best action scene. We did an anniversary episode, which was a free-for-all. Anyone that had any film we'd reviewed or spoke about in this video that you'd spoken about yourself, you could qualify. So it's just a free-for-all for best film. Best comic book movie moment, best movie badass, best Game of Thrones character, best movie villain, best MCU moment, worst Star Wars moment, worst sequel, worst summer blockbusters, best summer blockbuster, I think, best horror movie, best rivalry, and today, best apocalyptic movie.
I could do a quick
worst summer blockbuster could be a fun one.
It's a proper nostalgia for that.
If I could do a quick recommendation, whichever was, I think it was the best action scene. I can't remember who was argued for the Gungan fight scene in The Phantom Menace. It's one of the funniest things I've ever heard and been a part of in my entire. It was honestly, it was incredible. If you're ever bored, like you just go and you could loop that for 10 hours and you would just find it as funny the 100th time as the first time. It was just so funny.
He was so convincing in his
argument. It was incredible. It had no right being that good. It was genuinely phenomenal.
And that's Al, who did have the 100% record, I think, until the Gungan fight, I want to say. There's some incredible moments across all of these.
The guy that's seen to think, oh boy, he's so passionate about the stuff that he has. And that deserves some recommendation.
Yeah, best Gungan scene. The Gungan fight went up against the Matrix.
Yeah, it was.
But there's a plug there. I can't wait to do some more of these. It's such good fun. Right, the final. Let's get this out of the way, then we can talk. Right. So, Chris, we're going to do the extended, aren't we? You've got a minute and a half to talk about Terminator. Harry, you'll have a minute and a half to talk about Blade Runner, and then Chris, you'll get. Is it 45 seconds we do for the rebuttal, or is it a minute?
It's a minute. I think it's a minute. I think we added the rule in. If we are struggling for things to say, it's an optional minute. You don't have to use the whole time. You can end it wherever you like.
If you want to stop, you can just stop. Yeah. So, Chris, minute and a half on the clock starts No.
What's so great about the Terminator is the tone of it and the feel and the atmosphere and how it never lets up. Not only just from the stark, terrifying future of the future war against the machines, and the conditions that everyone's living in. It's the last gasp of humanity, essentially. But throughout as well, it's so different to even its sequel, which most people regard as the best. It is a stalker thriller. It is almost like a horror film, the first one, throughout the entire film. And I think that gives the film so much more weight and impact throughout the movie, and that you do have that around any corner the Terminator could be there, and it's just absolutely terrifying. And I don't think that in terms of a future and everything like that, I don't think Blade Runner ever comes close to that. Blade Runner is very dreamlike and very idealistic in terms of its future. But if we're arguing best apocalyptic film, you can see humanity, and we've sort of stayed the same. It's a logical progression of where we will eventually get to, whereas Terminator is this horrific future, but basically about the same thing, creating machines and the wars and violence against each other, mankind and machines. But Terminator does it in a much more terrifying way. It's this voiceless, faceless force, which to me as a robot makes them much more terrifying. The robots in Blade Runner feel much more human than the humans, which I guess there is an argument to be made there. But in having a voiceless, just sentient cyber army is terrifying. They're completely uncompromising. They don't know fear. They don't know pity. And they absolutely will not stop until they have achieved their time.
Sorry, my internet cut out there.
You've talked about there that the tone of the Terminator is excellent. Well, cyberpunk as a genre, and Blade Runner in particular, lives and dies by its tone. And the fact that it is still heralded as one of the, if not the best representations of cyberpunk in any sort of film, just says right there just how good the tone is. The music, the score, the neon lights, the rain, all of it just blends together to create this, again, you say like dreamlike state, as if it's a bad thing, as if that's something that disqualifies it against being this dystopian future. You say it's idealistic. I wouldn't exactly call it an idealistic future. I'd call it bleak and unrepentive and just generally just depressing. Decker as a character, as mentioned before, people have said he's one-dimensional. I couldn't disagree more. I think his internal struggle between actually being human, what it means to be human, is like a personification of the themes that the whole film tries to address. You say that the villains in the villain in Terminator are machines, which makes them more terrifying. I think that's completely wrong. I think that makes them more knowable. I think the fact that the villain in Blade Runner is just us, it's society, it's the way that the system is orchestrated. It's a much more progressive and interesting concept than just machine bad, man good. It's more than just a stalker film, a horror film. It's this philosophical nightmare that really I think brings the best of Apocalypse.
I would argue that you don't really get much substance to Deckard's character unless you watch the final cut, and even then, it's just B-roll from another Ridley Scott movie thrown in, which then leaves it to the audience's imagination. That wasn't in the director's original vision of that movie. That wasn't how it originally went over. And with Terminator as well, James Cameron uses some very clever editing techniques to sort of cement the connection between our present-day world of what was at the time, the 80s, and the future world. There are beautiful shots of, say, a crane in an industrial estate, which then crossfades into one of the Terminator machines, like steamrolling over skulls. So you can see that progression of where, if mankind continues to go this way in terms of its pursuit of technology and, becoming more than what we are, it's essentially going to be our downfall. And the film perfectly encapsulates that in the very final scene of the film. Although they overcome the Terminator, that driving into the distance with a storm on the horizon, a storm is coming, beautiful visual magnifier there.
You said there that Decker's character in the original version doesn't have any insight into him. In the original theatrical cut, it has a voiceover. It's literally this noir-esque thing where you literally see the innermost regions of Decker's mind. Don't get me wrong, I don't particularly enjoy that. I think that it was quite hammy, and I think that it adds more that you don't know a little bit what he's thinking. But the argument that that's only in the director's cut is just incorrect. As well as your idea about this whole progression of technology, I think that's what the Terminator is trying to go for, but I don't think it ever really comes on that. The idea that an AI will take over and kill everyone is interesting. Sure, Stephen Hawking's talked about it. Loads of people have talked about it. It's not realistic. The amount of safeguards in place for that is just absurd. Whereas the idea that capitalism can slowly destroy the world that we are living in is very realistic and frankly happening currently if you look at the state of the US with the current virus. But I think that Blade Runner really goes into depth of a sort of much more subtle apocalypse than just.
That was a good fight.
That was an amazing fight. I love
Yeah, that was
very
a
good final
yeah.
fight.
I'm glad it wasn't sort of an anticlimactic final, given that Chris had sort of gotten both picks. That was absolutely incredible. I was making like so many notes there.
Okay.
So we have had that before, haven't we? Where like the semi-finals have been much more compelling than you get to the final argument. It's like, oh,
I think the final's so hard though because you have so much longer to talk about the film, but you've already talked about it. Was it 2 or 3 times already? So it's such a hard thing to do.
It was quite nice coming into that fresh because I could just come out with any of the opinions I had on Blade Runner, whereas you've already talked about the Terminator so much. Like,
yeah.
I feel like this argument was very even, so I feel like possibly all 3 of us are going to vote. So I'm going to get mine out of the way first. As far as talking about what was the best apocalyptic film, the best film apocalypse, I think Chris had a lot more substance in his arguments. Harry, you put up a really good fight, once again, with not much time to actually formulate the arguments and just basically come up with it on the spot. But you only really touched on the apocalypse that is experienced in Blade Runner in the rebuttal, whereas Chris not only had it in his opening statement, but he also expanded upon it further. He talked more about the actual visualization of the apocalypse taking place, or at least the before and after, and the journey that it takes you through to get you there. So overall, I think just based on that, I'm going to have to give it to Chris and to Terminator.
Okay.
George, you ready? Or you okay?
I'm kind of ready, but because my internet kept cutting out, I missed about 30 seconds of each person's argument. So I'm trying to. I can only piece mine off what I heard, which is really annoying.
Okay.
It's cut out again. Sorry, I keep shaking my head.
I'll go then, just for the sake of sort of ease. I think that was one of the more sort of blow for blow. That was just incredible. I think that's one of the most balanced arguments that I think I've ever heard. I don't know if you guys have heard way more than me, but I think that's one of the best ones I've ever heard.
That felt like Rumble in the Jungle to me. Like,
no, that was
balanced,
a genuine.
But it felt weirdly calm.
Yeah, that's the thing. It was so. It was like a dance more than a fight. You were both sort of just it was
going backwards and forwards.
Yeah, definitely.
You don't usually see that in many of the battles. Usually,
I think it really helps that we both really love both of these films.
Yeah, you could. It shone through. I think as the finalists, these are 2 of the sort of best films in the bracket for my money. I think I'm going to give it. I think I'm just going to edge it towards Chris just a little bit, but I think it's not a discredit to Harry, who fought that so well. And like I said again, like he didn't have any sort of time to sort of prepare maybe an argument. I don't know if it would be interesting to hear it again if Harry had more time. Perhaps I'd probably lean the other way. But I think Chris's argument sort of built. I think it sort of built on what he'd already put down, but it built towards more of a sort of a crescendo, if you know what I mean. I think his argument is sort of the points he'd lay down built and created something just a little bit more complete. But again, that's just because I think Harry, obviously, he's just been dropped on this like 3 minutes ago or whatever to sort of that he's got to argue for this film. So I would say Chris just takes it, but I wouldn't be ashamed to have not won that one, because I think they're both winners for that one, to be honest.
George, did you said your internet was cutting out? Did you manage to like hear what was
from
said?
From what I heard, from what I heard, I think Chris was stronger, but I don't know what I've missed. So I'm kind of relieved that you 2 have gone and.
Yeah, that's why I sort of went ahead of you. I didn't want to sort of make you put you in a position where you couldn't judge.
Dropped a minute, you know.
It just keeps like everyone just like freezes, and then like 5 seconds later it comes back to normal. But as it's pure final,
love for both movies,
I'll be honest. As far as a bracket, which pick was Terminator for you? Was it your number 2 pick?
It was my number 2 pick. Matrix was my first pick.
Yeah.
There it is. Wow. Oh, I love it. Look at that.
Sorry,
That's cool.
I was able to change the apocalypse to nuclear bombs between each one, because normally I do something like that. I didn't realize until we were reminiscing. I think for best action scene, there was just a random explosive in the middle of everyone, which was just a bit weird. But here's a nuclear bomb, which I think gives it a lot better, a bit more grounded.
I mean,
hopefully we don't get
of like final image. that's a pretty awesome final image, right? Just that poster of the original Terminator film. Like, my God.
I think it's quite funny that both the characters that were armed with guns in their photos made it to the final.
Yes.
I think that says something about this bracket.
But Caesar didn't. Ah.
Like, his is on his back.
Yeah, he's not sort of primed, you know. Harrison Ford's already aiming that goddamn thing, you know.
No.
I think that's
Well,
Yeah,
to be honest, as if looking from the outset, I'm happy overall with who ended up winning. I would have been happy with either of them winning, to be honest. But if
my
someone
biggest
said to me,
confession?
if someone said to me at the start of the day, "Oh, Terminator is going to be the eventual winner of the best apocalyptic film," I'd be like, "Yeah, sure, why not?" Like,
my biggest thing was that I had no intention of picking Interstellar until you two both said to me, "Are we going to predict his four?" I was like, "What's
Yeah.
the fourth one?" Due to like Interstellar, I was like, "Oh yeah, I'll pick Interstellar." I was like, "Cheers for that, guys!" And took out Children of Men. Job done.
Yeah, that was
I
something
will say-
no one did.
I will say I do have the immediate need for going and watching Cloud Atlas now, but I really want the 4-hour asshole cut or whatever it's called to watch with it.
I've been planning on rewatching Interstellar for ages, and I think this is settled for me to do it tomorrow. Because
in,
I've rewatched
in these times, whilst we go and rewatch films, you guys should come and watch our channel.
I mean,
watch the
we-
Gungan fight.
we don't have a decision yet. But I think we're all around a bit more, so we want to kind of get the wheels turning, because we say this every time, and I don't think any of us are lying. These are funner than doing reviews.
Yeah,
Like when you do a review, you have to go to the cinema. There's nothing wrong with that. Like we love it, but like when they get something, when there's something none of us liked, and it's like, oh, let's talk about it for like 15 minutes. We're like, oh.
I think
But,
one of the strengths
we've got-
of this
we've got
is as
loads
well,
of
you don't
ideas.
necessarily have had to have seen the sort of movie that you're arguing against. I think you can you can come into it and base what you're going to say off what your opponent sort of brings to the table, which I think is the strength of this.
We've
The-
had
the
loads of
first-
ideas bouncing around for ages about different brackets that we could do.
So we're
Just off the
trying
top of my
to
head,
more outside the box because we always have like moment, we always have character. We're trying to think of.
I feel like we can maybe do a best animated film of all time one. Would we include Disney and Pixar and
You'd have
Ghibli
to,
and
Yeah. This is why we always have the same discussion.
everything?
It's because when we've done in the past, it used to be the winner would always pick, and then we kind of evolved it to not necessarily topical, but we wanted to do a Bond thing, and obviously that got postponed to November. So there's last sort of, I guess, year or so, year and a half, we've made it a bit more topical in terms of what we're doing and when we do it. But none of us have probably really anything planned right now for the next few weeks. You know, current affairs and all that jazz. But it's been good fun tonight. I've got no idea what to do next, but I'm sure we'll let you guys know as soon as we know. We had literally 2 days' notice on this. We agreed this on Thursday nights, and on Friday we did a draft, and today we are fighting.
Are we going to set a date for Drunk Cats? That's the question.
We'll amongst
we'll
our,
discuss that. Yeah, we'll let everyone know when we've got a date.
but that's going to be amazing. I can't wait for that.
That is
I've
gonna
stayed
be
away
phenomenal.
from all clips other than the trailers, all reviews, everything. I'm going into that movie completely cold. And
I should probably add in a sixth rule: drink whenever you feel like you should drink.
And we talk about possible asshole cut of Cats. Maybe we'll keep drinking them so much that we will see assholes by the end of it. Who knows? Anything could happen, because I think we're going to be drinking a whole lot during that movie. That's going to be fun. Check our socials for more information on that when we do it, which I will bring up right now if they're on here. Let's see if they are. They are. Fantastic. So that's Facebook /Cinema Savvy, Twitter @cinema_savvy, and I don't know if we still got the Instagram thing up, but
I post up a story every now and then, but I'll probably be more active on it now and posting up different details for people to sign up onto as well.
But we post all times. Whenever we've got anything scheduled, we always keep you posted there with times and everything like that internationally as well. I do want to say a massive thank you to Ryan for returning as our judge, doing a fine job as ever. And thank you to Harry for jumping on for the first time, throwing him into the Lion's Den. Did a tremendous job tonight, man. Hope you had a good time with it. And I think, all of us will agree that we'd love to see you back on this fighting again. Because it was awesome.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, well, I don't know if anyone's still watching, but we did have some people watching, which was nice, and commenting throughout. So thank you to everyone who did tune in tonight. Stay safe, everyone, and we will be back with more content, talking more movies, just having a good time during these times. And yeah, it's been a pleasure. So until the next video, we'll see you guys next time. Thanks for watching.